Chapter 2198. The hand stopped 1.5 m above Yi Xian's head. After a moment of silence, the hand vanished, and the surroundings returned to normal. It was as if it had never appeared. After a short while, Yi Xian noticed that he was on a small island, and there was a black hall at the center of the island. It was majestic and extremely grand. The island was surrounded by water, and at the end of the water was an endless mountain range. Yi Xian turned around and saw a woman standing under a cherry blossom tree in the distance. The woman wore a simple linen short-sleeved shirt. The sleeves were a little short, revealing two slender, jade-like hands. On both sides of her shirt, there were two small pockets. In the pockets, there were two pens that didn't belong to this world. The woman wore loose linen trousers. There were no patterns on the trousers, and they were very simple and clean. On her feet was a pair of linen slippers. They were very simple, and they were very ordinary cloth shoes. The woman's hair was very long, and it reached her waist. However, the front of her forehead was very short, and she had bangs that reached her eyebrows. Beneath the bangs was a pair of light eyebrows that were very simple and natural without any traces of makeup. Beneath the beautiful eyebrows was a pair of extremely clear eyes, and they were like the purest water in autumn. Moreover, there was a small cloth bag hanging from her waist. The woman held a thick ancient book in her hands and placed it before her chest. She was staring at Yi Xian with a faint smile on her face. It was like a spring breeze, and it made one feel very comfortable. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he said, "Pavilion Master?" The woman blinked, and then she walked slowly to Yi Xian. She stretched out her right hand and smiled, "Hello, I'm Qin Guan. That's my real name." Yi Xian frowned slightly, "Qin Guan." The woman smiled faintly like a spring breeze, "Yes, but it sounds like a man's name?" Yi Xian nodded, "Yes." The woman smiled, and then she said, "My father gave it to me." At this moment, Xiaofan suddenly said, "Young master, she wants to shake hands with you. This is the Milky Way's etiquette. You have to shake hands with her." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before reaching out with his right hand to hold the woman's hand. The woman blinked and did not speak. Xiaofan suddenly said, "What the heck, young master, I asked you to shake hands with him, not hold his hand. What are you doing?" Yi Xian's face darkened. "Why didn't you make it clear?" Xiaofan said in a deep voice, "Motherf asterisk Ker, am I not clear enough? You are the one who wants to act like a hooligan." Yi Xian was about to speak when Qin Guan suddenly laughed and asked, "Is this your pagoda?" Yi Xian looked at Qin Guan in astonishment. "You can hear it?" Qin Guan giggled. "I'm not trying to eavesdrop. Its concealment method is too backward. It's useless in front of me." Yi Xian was silent. "Big boss. This woman, she's a real big boss." Qin Guan blinked. "Protagonist Yi, can you let me take a look at your pagoda?" Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before saying, "Miss Qin Guan, why do you call me Protagonist Yi?" "My name is Yi Xian." Qin Guan laughed. "Then I'll call you Young Master Yi." Yi Xian asked in a deep voice, "What does protagonist mean?" Qin Guan blinked. "Simply put, it's equivalent to being the child of destiny. To put it in a more complicated way, it's not something that can be explained in a few words. Because it involves too many things, it's very troublesome to explain. In any case, it's very powerful." Yi Xian was speechless. Qin Guan asked again, "Can I take a look at your pagoda?" Obviously, she was very curious about Yi Xian's Xiaofan. Yi Xian nodded. "Sure." With that, he handed Xiaofan to Qin Guan. Actually, he also wanted to see Qin Guan's surprised expression. However, he was a little disappointed. After Qin Guan took Xiaofan, she sized up Xiaofan. After a moment, her eyes suddenly lit up and she laughed. "That's amazing. The time inside Xiao Ta and the outside world can be reversed to such an extent. That's amazing. With that, she returned Xiao Ta to Yi Xian. Although there was admiration in her eyes, there was no shock or astonishment. Yi Xian looked at Qin Guan. Aren't you shocked? Qin Guan smiled. I'm all right. Yi Xian was silent for a moment before asking, can you do it? Qin Guan nodded. Yes. Yi Xian's expression froze. He hesitated for a moment before asking again, can you? Qin Guan nodded. Yes. Yi Xian was silent. His heart was in turmoil. This woman said she could? F***ck. What the hell? This was Qing Er's personal reversal of time. How many almighty people would be in awe of it? And this woman in front of him said she could do it too? At this moment, Yi Xian was a little confused. This woman wouldn't be like him, who liked to brag, right? Qin Guan suddenly laughed. Young Master Yi, you've taken all my books. And my little gun, right? Yi Xian retracted his thoughts and smiled. It's my fault for not being strict. I've already warned Xiao Ta that it won't take things randomly in the future. If it takes things randomly again, I'll break its legs. F***ck. Small Tower immediately jumped up, and began to spit out a fragrance. Yi Xian directly blocked Xiao Ta. Xiao Ta? Qin Guan covered her mouth and laughed. It was like 100 flowers blooming, making everything pale in comparison. Mr. Yi. Oh no, young Master Yi, it was obviously you who took it. How could you say it was Xiao Ta who took it? It's not good to lie. Yi Xian, Qin Guan stretched out her little hand and smiled. Young Master Yi, I can give you the books, but the gun. This gun is not suitable to appear in this universe. Can you return it to me? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then said, Miss Qin Guan, to be honest, it took the initiative to recognize me as its master, F***ck. The little gun suddenly said angrily, let me out. F***ck, how can you do this? Let me out. Xiao Ta suddenly said, don't F***king scream. He has already blocked all of us. This guy is ready to become a human. Little gun, Qin Guan stared at Yi Xian, blinking her eyes. This was the first time she met someone who lied without even blushing. She did not know what to say for a moment. Yi Xian quickly said, I won't take your gun for free. I'll give you a gift too. As he said that, he quickly took out a piece of wood and began to carve. Qin Guan glanced at the wood in Yi Xian's hand, then gently stroked her hair behind her ear and smiled. Carve? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Qin Guan smiled. I also like art very much. Yi Xian quickly said, I like art very much too. Qin Guan looked at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, do you know what art is? Yi Xian nodded and said casually, art refers to using some means or medium to create an image and then sell it for a lot of money. The more expensive it is, the better the art. After a moment of silence, Qin Guan said, I can't refute that. Yi Xian, after a while, Yi Xian carved a small wooden figure. The small wooden figure was vivid and lifelike, exactly the same as Qin Guan. Yi Xian handed the small wooden figure to Qin Guan. Qin Guan took the small wooden figure and looked at it. She was amazed. Young Master Yi, you didn't use any magical power. You carved it so well. It's purely by hand. If you go to our place, you can be a craftsman. Yi Xian smiled. You like it, don't you? Qin Guan looked at Yi Xian. Is this for me? Yi Xian nodded. Qin Guan shook her head. I don't deserve it. As she said, she returned the small wooden figure to Yi Xian. It's not appropriate to accept a gift from you on our first meeting. Yi Xian quickly said, I'm not giving it to you for free. This small wooden figure is for you, and you're giving me that spear. We're even. We're even. I'm not at a loss. Don't feel guilty. Qin Guan hesitated and said, I'm at a loss. Yi Xian, Qin Guan still wanted to say something, but Yi Xian suddenly said, Miss Qin Guan, I remember something. Many people from Immortal Treasure Pavilion don't recognize the Xiantian token you gave me. Not only do they not recognize it, but the previous president of Immortal Treasure Pavilion almost killed me. My body was crushed. Sigh. Qin Guan rolled her eyes at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, I know what you mean. I can give you that small spear, but you have to promise me one thing. Yi Xian was a little curious. What is it? Qin Guan said seriously, this spear is very powerful. Once it is used, it will cause great harm to the world. You have to promise me that you can't use it easily. If the energy is too great, it will cause great pollution. Some powerful people are not afraid of it, but for those weak creatures, this pollution is destructive. Also, you can't use it on ordinary people or ordinary creatures, okay? Yi Xian nodded. Okay. Qin Guan nodded slightly. As for your small wooden figure, Yi Xian quickly said, I'll give it to you. Qin Guan looked at the small wooden figure and was silent. Yi Xian asked, what's wrong? Qin Guan shook her head slightly. Just now, I felt the cause and effect. If I accept this thing, I'm afraid that something will happen in the future, Yi Xian said with a smile, why bother about the future? It's important to live in the present. It's just a small wooden figure. It represents the pure friendship between you and me. Qin Guan smiled and said, that's true. After saying that, she put away the small wooden figure. Yi Xian glanced at the small cloth bag on Qin Guan's waist and said, Miss Qin Guan, are you from the Milky Way? Qin Guan nodded. Yes. Young Master also knows the Milky Way. Yi Xian smiled and said, I know. My two friends are there. Qin Guan smiled slightly. I know. Is it little white and area? Yi Xian was stunned. How do you know? Qin Guan smiled and said, I met them once. But I was just a little girl at that time. Oh, I still remember that they owed me money and didn't pay me back. He. Yi Xian was speechless. Meanwhile, Xiaota said abruptly, Young Master, ask her what her father's name is. Yi Xian said, What do you mean? Xiaota said, Ask her. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, Miss Qin Guan, what's your father's name? Qin Guan blinked. Qin Bufan. P.S. If you don't know about Qin Bufan, you can take a look at the previous book, Invincible Sword Domain. If you've read it, you should remember him. As for the Pavilion Master, he appeared in the first article I wrote, Outside the Milky Way. You can take a look. Just search for the official WeChat account, Green Phoenix Peak, and follow me. The only official account, Green Phoenix Peak. That's all. Don't make a mistake. Chapter 2199. Qin Bufan. Xiaota suddenly sighed softly when he heard this name, and his sigh carried a trace of a complicated tone. Yi Xian was quite curious. Xiaota, what's wrong? Xiaota sighed once more. Her father and master are brothers, brothers of life and death. Brothers of life and death. Yi Xian was quite surprised. My father's brothers of life and death? Xiaota said, yes. I never expected that Qin Bufan's daughter would actually come to this world again. Moreover, she's so terrifying. Yi Xian looked at Qin Guan in front of him and said with a smile, You can hear Lil Tower's words, right? Qin Guan nodded. Yi Xian gazed at Qin Guan and said, Do you know that your father and my father know each other? Qin Guan grinned. Dao Yi, your father should be that green-clothed swordsman, right? Yi Xian nodded. Qin Guan smiled, I've investigated him in the past, and he fought alongside my father in the past. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, can you revive your father? Qin Guan shook her head, I can't. She paused for a moment before she continued, no one can revive the dead. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, my father seems to have been revived in the past. Qin Guan smiled, the difference is that it's impossible to revive someone who's truly dead. Even if time is reversed, it's impossible. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, can you tell me about it in detail? Qin Guan thought for a moment and said, it's very complicated. If I were to explain it in detail, then it would involve numerous theories, and you probably wouldn't be able to understand it. Yi Xian's face instantly darkened when he heard this. It wasn't very harmful, but it was extremely humiliating. At this time, a voice suddenly came from the side, Miss Qin Guan. Yi Xian turned his head and saw a middle-aged man sitting cross-legged at the entrance of the hall not far away. The middle-aged man wore a loose gray robe and his long hair draped over his shoulders. His hands were placed on his knees. The Emperor of the Ancients. Yi Xian took a look at the primeval Grand Emperor with a solemn look in his eyes. He had already exchanged blows with the other party once. Terrifying. This was definitely far beyond the realm of quantitative change. Qin Guan glanced at the Primordial and smiled, Primordial, you want to be resurrected too? The desolate antiquity smiled bitterly. Is that even possible? Qin Guan nodded. It's possible for you because you still have a wisp of your divided soul, and your consciousness is still in this world. Of course, the most important reason is that the enemy didn't completely erase you when he killed you. Otherwise, there would be no chance. Hearing this, the ancient desolate immediately stood up and bowed respectfully. Please save me, Miss Qin. Qin Guan was silent. The ancient desolate antiquity bowed again. Yi Xian tugged on Qin Guan's clothes and asked softly, can you really save him? Qin Guan nodded. I can. But I don't want to. Yi Xian was slightly stunned, and then he said, why? Qin Guan glanced at the ancient desolate antiquity in the distance. He's not a good person. If I save him today, then he'll bring harm to countless living beings in the future. Even though I didn't kill them, they'll die because of me. At this point, she shook her head slightly. It's a pleasure to help others, but it depends on the person. Don't save a demon and bring harm to the world. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, if he's a good person, then you'll save him, right? Qin Guan nodded. I will. Yi Xian said solemnly, if you really save him, then aren't you afraid of angering the big shot who killed him? Qin Guan smiled mischievously. I have a gun and money. Who am I afraid of? As she spoke, she took out a gun. The gun was slightly shorter than Yi Xian's, and it was purplish-black in color. She waved it at Yi Xian and said, this gun of mine is called All Life is Equal. I don't care if he's a supreme emperor, he'll kneel before me. Yi Xian. At this moment, the ancient desolate antiquity suddenly bowed again and said, Miss Qin Guan. Qin Guan put away her gun and shook her head. Ancient desolate antiquity, as far as I know, you once killed countless people to obtain a heaven vein. The karma of your evil thoughts is endless. Do you know that a large part of the reason why you ended up like this today is because of the sins you committed in the past? The ancient desolate antiquity said in a low voice, Miss Qin, this world is one where the strong are respected. Every cultivator has their hands stained with blood. As he spoke, he glanced at Yi Xian. Take him for example. Aren't his hands stained with blood as well? What kind of evil did he suffer? Qin Guan shook her head. You're different from him. The ancient desolate antiquity frowned slightly. How so? Qin Guan giggled. There's someone behind him, but there's no one behind you. The ancient desolate antiquity. Yi Xian. Qin Guan continued. Ancient desolate antiquity, I'm not criticizing you because you're right. This is how the world is. Every cultivator has their hands stained with blood. However, I personally don't like people who kill, so I refuse to reverse life and death for you. The ancient desolate antiquity was silent. Yi Xian glanced at the ancient desolate antiquity, then tugged on Qin Guan's clothes. Just as he was about to speak, Qin Guan suddenly glared at him. Don't pull so hard. My clothes are going to fall off. Yi Xian. Qin Guan rolled her eyes at Yi Xian. What are you trying to say? Yi Xian said in a low voice, Miss Qin Guan, you said some people can be reborn. Are you referring to those who still have a divine soul or a will in this world? Qin Guan nodded. Those who are completely erased can't be brought back to life. Completely erased means that the person's essence is gone. This is a true death. Hearing this, Yi Xian understood. Should I leave a clone with Qing, If that's the case, who do I need to be afraid of? Even if I'm killed, I can always start over. At the thought of this, Yi Xian could not help but show a smile at the corners of his mouth. He was very happy. In the distance, the ancient desolate antiquity suddenly sighed and slowly sat down with a sad expression. Qin Guan suddenly said, Ancient desolate antiquity, I came here today to see that vein of heaven. Can you let me take a look? The ancient desolate antiquity hesitated for a moment before opening his palm. A palm-sized stone slowly floated in front of Qin Guan. The stone was snow-white, and there was a tiny word on it, Fa. Qin Guan looked at it for a moment, then smiled. So that's how it is. As she spoke, she opened her palm, and the vein of heaven slowly floated in front of the ancient desolate antiquity. The ancient desolate antiquity looked at Qin Guan. Miss Qin, do you know where this thing came from? Qin Guan nodded. From the forbidden place. The ancient desolate antiquity frowned. The forbidden place? Qin Guan smiled and didn't say anything else. She turned to look at Yi Xian. I'm going to a place to do something. Do you want to come with me? Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, all right. Qin Guan smiled. Let's go. As she spoke, she was about to take Yi Xian away. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly looked at the ancient desolate antiquity. Senior, are you going to leave behind an inheritance? The ancient desolate antiquity looked at Yi Xian. Yes. Yi Xian said seriously, what do you think of me, senior? The ancient desolate antiquity, Qin Guan looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said again, senior, after today, I'm afraid it'll be difficult for you to meet a monstrous genius like me again. The ancient desolate antiquity glanced at Yi Xian. You're not suitable. Yi Xian hurriedly said, why not? I'll see if I can change it. If I can, I'll change it for you on the spot until you're satisfied. Qin Guan, the ancient desolate antiquity, was completely speechless. Qin Guan moved closer to Yi Xian and whispered, his inheritance isn't that good. Yi Xian blinked. Really? Qin Guan nodded. I don't lie under normal circumstances. Yi Xian, seeing that the ancient desolate antiquity was still hesitating, Yi Xian smiled and then looked at Qin Guan. Let's go. Qin Guan nodded. She opened her palm and a sword appeared in her hand. The next moment, the sword suddenly turned into a sword light and flew up, then circled around her and landed steadily at her feet. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian was shocked. You're a swordsman? Qin Guan shook her head. No. Yi Xian was puzzled. Then Qin Guan smiled. I just like flying swords. This sword of mine is used for flying, not for fighting. Yi Xian, just as the two of them were about to leave, the ancient desolate antiquity suddenly said, little guy, wait. Yi Xian turned to look at the ancient desolate antiquity. The ancient desolate antiquity suddenly opened his palm and the vein of heaven slowly floated in front of Yi Xian. My inheritance is in this vein of heaven. From now on, you are the third successor of this vein of heaven. Yi Xian blinked. The third? The ancient desolate antiquity smiled. Yes. Yi Xian asked, who's the first? The ancient desolate antiquity shook his head. I don't know. Yi Xian didn't ask further. He immediately accepted the vein of heaven and said, thank you. The ancient desolate antiquity looked at Yi Xian and said meaningfully, take care. With that, his body gradually became illusory. In the end, he chose to disappear. Beg Qin Guan? He didn't do that. In any case, he was a super giant. Although he wanted to live, he would never beg to live. If he was afraid of death, he wouldn't have fought to the end back then. Just like a dragon, even if it died, it would never wag its tail and beg. Soon, the ancient desolate antiquity completely disappeared. After the ancient desolate antiquity disappeared, the secret realm in the middle of the square began to shatter. Yi Xian bowed deeply in the direction of the ancient desolate antiquity. He then turned to look at Qin Guan. Is he dead? Qin Guan nodded. Not at all. Yi Xian fell silent. After cultivating for millions of years, he finally turned to dust. He felt a little sad. Qin Guan suddenly said, let's go. Yi Xian nodded. The two of them were about to leave. At this time, after the secret realm disappeared, a powerful aura suddenly appeared in the distant sky. Seeing this, Yi Xian frowned. Obviously, after the ancient desolate antiquity disappeared, this place became less dangerous. Therefore, countless experts rushed to this place. Soon, Yi Xian sensed two familiar auras. One was the aura of Tai Huang. The other was the patriarch of the spirit demon race, Wuxia. They were all here. At this time, Qin Guan said, ignore them. Let's go. Yi Xian nodded. With that, he and Qin Guan left on their swords. In the distant sky, Wuxia stared at Yi Xian who disappeared at the end of the starry sky. His eyes were cold. Vein of Heaven. Chapter 2200. Before long, the news of Yi Xian obtaining the vein of the heaven spread throughout the great wilderness and the spirit demon race. The vein of the heavens. That was a godlike existence. Even the Time Lord and the Five Elements Lord coveted such a divine item. And now, Yi Xian obtained it. Who was Yi Xian? In fact, both the great wilderness and the spirit demon realm were familiar with Yi Xian. After all, this was the one who slaughtered the spirit demon realm. After a moment of silence, Wuxia turned and left. Beside him, Tai Huang frowned and said softly, Pavilion Master. At this moment, an expert from the great wilderness temple suddenly appeared in front of Tai Huang and said solemnly, Hall Master, the vein of the heavens, should we snatch it? Tai Huang slapped him with the back of his hand. Boom! The expert from the great wilderness temple was slapped tens of thousands of meters away. Tai Huang coldly glanced at the expert that was sent flying, then pointed at his own head, somewhat disappointed that iron did not meet his expectations. Don't just cultivate realms, cultivate more IQ. With that, he turned and left. The expert from the great wilderness temple. In the distant starry sky, Yi Xian and Qin Guan traveled on their swords. Yi Xian glanced at Qin Guan not far away. Qin Guan had his hands behind his back, his long hair fluttering in the wind, exuding an indescribable temperament. Qin Guan suddenly smiled. Young Master Yi, is the spirit demon race troubling you? Yi Xian nodded. Qin Guan smiled. You don't need to be afraid of them. Their race will eventually become history. Yi Xian looked at Qin Guan. Why? Qin Guan smiled mischievously. Because they're troubling you. Yi Xian was silent for a moment. Why will they become history if they're troubling me? Qin Guan smiled. Young Master Yi, there are 4 types of people in this world that are very terrifying. You're one of them. Yi Xian said solemnly, can you tell me more about it? Qin Guan nodded slightly and said, in our galaxy, people like you are called the Chosen One, that is, the Halo of Light. Under normal circumstances, you will not die, unless, Yi Xian quickly asked, unless what? Qin Guan smiled and said, unless the next person with the mandate of heaven appears. If the next person with the mandate of heaven appears, then the previous person will no longer be the only one, and everything in the world will no longer revolve around him. Therefore, he may die. Yi Xian was silent. Qin Guan sized up Yi Xian, and then he said, you're the only one right now, so you won't die for now. But I have a feeling that you won't be the only one anymore. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. Who's next? Can I kill him in advance? Qin Guan blinked. I advise you not to do that. Yi Xian was a little puzzled. Why? Qin Guan said seriously, because the next person with the mandate of heaven is likely to be your son. Yi Xian's expression froze. Qin Guan suddenly said, Uncle Yang, that is, your father, is the last person with the halo of light. Yi Xian, at this time, Xiaofan suddenly said, Sister Guan, aren't you afraid of revealing the secret of heaven? Qin Guan grinned and then took out a gun. I have a gun. I'm not afraid. Xiaofan, Yi Xian hesitated and then said, Miss Qin Guan, what realm are you in? Qin Guan shook her head. I don't cultivate. Hearing this, Yi Xian was stunned. You don't cultivate? Are you a person with no realm? Qin Guan nodded. I like research, but I don't like cultivation. So, I don't fight. Don't fight. Yi Xian was a little puzzled. This woman is so terrifying, but she doesn't know how to fight? Don't know how to fight? Yi Xian said in a low voice, so, you've been relying on this gun to defend yourself all these years? Qin Guan shook her head. Yi Xian was a little puzzled. He was about to speak when Qin Guan suddenly said, I don't rely on this gun. I rely on many guns. I have a lot of guns. I've fed each gun with 100 million star god veins. Yi Xian's expression froze. 100 million star god veins. Yi Xian's mind was in a mess. Is this what a rich woman is like? I only dare to use 50,000 at a time, but she uses 100 million at a time. Are these star god veins cabbages? I'm afraid I'm a fake second generation. At this time, Qin Guan said, in addition to star god veins, there is also a kind of spirit vein called time vein. This kind of time vein is the core spirit vein of a world. This kind of time vein is relatively rare because it takes at least 1 million years to condense into a time vein. Moreover, during this period, it can't be destroyed. Otherwise, it can't be called time vein. It can only be regarded as a pseudo-time vein. At this point, she shook her head slightly. This kind of time vein is too rare. Even I have less than a few million. Yi Xian's expression froze again. A few million, is it really rare? Is it really rare? Yi Xian was about to collapse. Qin Guan suddenly took out a gun from her small cloth bag. This gun was a little long as an adult. She glanced at Yi Xian and said with a smile, this is my big sniper. I've installed 200 million star god veins. In 1 million universes, as long as I want, I can instantly snipe anyone to death. With one snipe, their head will burst. I named it, Don't Mess With Me. Don't mess with me. Yi Xian, Qin Guan put the Don't Mess With Me into the small cloth bag. Then, she took out 2 egg-like things. They were black and had some strange runes and words drawn on them. Yi Xian was a little curious. This is? Qin Guan blinked. You haven't seen it before, right? Yi Xian nodded. Qin Guan smiled. This is called a nuclear bomb. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Egg? Egg closed? Qin Guan shook her head. The egg you're talking about is not the same as mine. Yi Xian, Qin Guan smiled and said, I've fed these two with 300 million star god veins. The core has endless energy. As long as I detonate it, Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and then asked, how powerful is it? Qin Guan thought for a moment and then said, it should be able to destroy 10,000 great ancient wastelands and spirit demon realm. Yi Xian. Qin Guan said again, I named them, disregard for martial ethics. Yi Xian, Qin Guan suddenly shrugged and then said, it's too powerful. I don't really want to use it because it will hurt the innocent. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and then said, how about you let me use it? Qin Guan hurriedly shook her head. No, no. Your killing intent is too strong. Moreover, your personality is quite extreme. I can't let you use it. As she said that, she quickly put it away. Yi Xian glanced at Qin Guan's small cloth bag and then said in his heart, Xiao Ta, if we snatch this cloth bag, what are the chances of success? Xiao Ta was silent for a moment and then said, young master, if you want to snatch it, do it yourself. Please don't drag me into it. I, Xiao Ta, am not that kind of tower. Yi Xian, Qin Guan suddenly looked into the distance and then said, we'll be there in half an hour. Yi Xian looked at Qin Guan and asked with a smile, Miss Qin Guan, what is your most powerful divine item? Qin Guan blinked and said, why are you asking this? Yi Xian smiled and said, I'm curious. Qin Guan smiled and said, I have 4 extremely powerful ones. However, I can only tell you one of them. I have to keep the other 3 a secret. Yi Xian was a little curious. Why keep it a secret? Qin Guan giggled and said, trump card. Of course I have to keep it a secret. Yi Xian, Qin Guan said, I have a fleet. Yi Xian looked at Qin Guan and asked, what kind of fleet? Qin Guan said, I have hundreds of cosmic god warships. On each of them, there are hundreds of starship god armaments that can travel through time and space at will. Moreover, the scale is still expanding. My current goal is to build 3,000 of them. As she said, she smiled mischievously and said, as long as I call them, they can instantly appear in front of me across millions of galaxies. I will attack wherever I point. Yi Xian was silent for a moment and thought to himself, Xiao Ta, can we afford to offend this woman? Xiao Ta said in a low voice, let's see if you can defend against the sword in her hand, equality of all beings. Yi Xian was silent for a moment and said, let's just be friends with her. Xiao Ta said, great minds think alike. If you can't win, join. No problem. Qin Guan suddenly said, we are here. As she said, she stopped and the sword under her feet flew back to her hand. She was about to put the sword into the small cloth bag when Yi Xian suddenly said, Miss Qin Guan, can I see your sword? Qin Guan smiled and said, of course you can. As she said, she handed the sword to Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at it. The sword was 2 fingers wide and 4 feet long, slightly longer than the average sword. The blade was very thin, like a cicada's wing. The blade was average and not particularly sharp. As a whole, there was nothing special about it. Yi Xian looked at Qin Guan and said, Miss Qin Guan, is your sword just an ordinary sword? Qin Guan smiled and said, to a swordsman, it is a very ordinary sword. Yi Xian did not understand. What do you mean? Qin Guan said, my sword is only powerful when it's full of money. Yi Xian. Qin Guan took the sword and pointed at the hilt. This is the entrance to charge money. As long as you feed it with star god pulse, it will become very, very powerful. As long as you have money, even an ordinary person can kill a quantitative change realm powerhouse with it. Of course, without money, it has no power. As she said this, she looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, "The strength of this sword does not depend on your attainment in swordsmanship, but whether you have money or not." Yi Xian, Qin Guan continued, "My sword is not as powerful as yours." Yi Xian asked, "Why?" Qin Guan smiled and said, "Your sword involves more knowledge, and some of its functions, such as helping you improve your realm, are not normal." Of course, I can understand that. After all, this world is not normal most of the time. Yi Xian, Qin Guan sheathed the sword and said, "Let's go." They must have been waiting for me for a long time. Yi Xian looked into the distance and saw a huge stone door not far away. Yi Xian followed Qin Guan and asked, "Miss Qin Guan, where are we going?" Qin Guan smiled and said, "The Great Thousand Domains, a place where countless planes intersect. Do you remember I told you that there are 4 kinds of people who are very scary? There are 2 other kinds there." Yi Xian, Xiaota suddenly sighed, "This girl is not a cultivator, she is a cultivator of money, the Tao of money." P.S. For those who haven't seen yesterday's news, you can search for my official WeChat account, on Green Phoenix Peak and click follow to find the news. Later on, I will also update some news. The main story of the Milky Way will be updated in the form of news, so everyone can follow it. Moreover, the news is also free, you can get it for free, why not? Moreover, every day there will be pictures of some of my cousins and so on. Finally, I will let everyone guess a question. What do you think this Qin Guan's bloodline is? Let me see how many people have the same idea as me. Chapter 2201. Boundless Domain. Yi Xian had to admit he was shocked when he had followed Qin Guan into the vast Kiliacosm territories. In the starry sky, Yi Xian saw countless cities floating in the air. These cities were majestic and extremely luxurious. At a glance, the entire starry sky was filled with them, and there was no end to them. It was a magnificent sight. Not only that, there were many people in the starry sky, and their auras were extremely strong. Clearly, they were not ordinary cultivators. Lively. This was Yi Xian's first impression. The boundless domain was too prosperous. Suddenly, Qin Guan smiled. "Let's go to the Celestial Treasure Pavilion." "Miss Qin Guan, is there a Celestial Treasure Pavilion here?" Yi Xian asked in a deep voice. Qin Guan turned to Yi Xian and smiled sweetly. "Of course, as long as the world is slightly bigger, there will be a Celestial Treasure Pavilion." "How many Celestial Treasure Pavilions do you have?" Yi Xian asked curiously. Qin Guan tilted her head and thought for a while. After a while, she shook her head. "I'm not sure about the exact number, but there should be tens of millions of them, or even more." Yi Xian was speechless. On the way, Yi Xian asked again, "Is the Celestial Treasure Pavilion the headquarters?" "No." Qin Guan shook her head. "Where is your headquarters then?" Yi Xian was curious. Just when Qin Guan was about to speak, a young man suddenly appeared in front of Qin Guan. Behind the young man were 2 old men in black robes. Their auras were as strong as the starry sky. Just by standing there, they gave off an invisible pressure. The young man smiled. "Pavilion Master Qin." "Oh, it's Sir Qianji. What's the matter?" Qin Guan smiled. The smile on Qianji's face was gentle. "Nothing. I just heard that Pavilion Master Qin is back. So, I'm here to meet you." As he spoke, he took a look at Yi Xian and smiled. This is young Master Yi Xian, my friend." Pavilion Master Qin smiled. "Friends." Hearing this, Qianji's eyes flashed with astonishment. However, he quickly returned to normal and looked at Yi Xian with a smile. "Young Master Yi, nice to meet you." Yi Xian smiled. Nice to meet you. Qin Guan smiled and said, Young Master Qian Ji, I still have some matters to attend to. Farewell. After that, she left with Yi Xian. Qian Ji was deep in thought as he watched Qin Guan and Yi Xian disappear into the distance. No one knew what he was thinking. At this moment, an old man behind him suddenly said, Do we need to investigate this youth? After a moment of silence, Qian Ji shook his head. The person that pavilion leader Qin befriended is definitely not an ordinary person. If we investigate him recklessly, we might offend him. Moreover, doing so would offend pavilion leader Qin. The old man nodded slightly and did not say anything else. Qian Ji looked into the distance. After some time, he shook his head and smiled bitterly. Everyone thinks that I, Qian Ji, can have anything I want, but, sigh, the two old men fell silent. They knew their young master's intention. If it was any other woman, their young master could have her with a wave of his hand. However, pavilion leader Qin was different. She was kind to everyone. This was polite, but it was also a form of alienation. On the road far away, Yi Xian was curious. Miss Qin Guan, did you go there to look for me? Qin Guan shook her head. Not really. I went there to take a look at the vein of the sky. Since you were there, I guess it's fate. Yi Xian smiled. It's fate indeed. Not long later, Qin Guan brought Yi Xian to the Celestial Treasure Pavilion. There were 12 floors in the pavilion and it was spacious. As soon as Qin Guan arrived at the entrance, an old man came out to welcome them. The old man walked to Qin Guan and knelt down. Pavilion leader. Qin Guan rolled her eyes at the old man. Oldly, didn't I tell you that I don't like to kneel? I don't like kneeling at every turn. Next time you see me, don't kneel. Oldly smiled awkwardly. I forgot. I forgot. Qin Guan shook her head helplessly. You always say that you forgot. Are all the presidents and managers here? Oldly quickly said, 1,360 presidents and 350 managers are here. Qin Guan nodded. Let them wait a little longer. With that, she walked into the Celestial Treasure Pavilion. Yi Xian followed her. Glancing at Yi Xian, Mr. Li felt a little curious. Without thinking too much, he hurriedly followed after them. Qin Guan came to the 12th floor. Seeing Yi Xian following, Oldly hesitated but didn't say anything. But to his surprise, Yi Xian followed Qin Guan into the 12th floor. Qin Guan didn't let Yi Xian stay outside. Oldly was in disbelief. For so many years, no one had been able to enter the 12th floor. Who was this young man? Oldly was curious. On the 12th floor, after Yi Xian came in, he looked around. The room was filled with bookshelves. There were many books on the bookshelves. He casually glanced at them and realized they weren't from this world. Qin Guan sat in front of the desk and looked at Yi Xian. She smiled. Can you lend me your sword again? Yi Xian nodded. Of course. With that, he moved his mind and the green profound sword flew to the desk in front of Qin Guan. Qin Guan carefully sized up the green profound sword before picking up the pen and writing. Yi Xian walked closer and couldn't understand it. Words that didn't belong to this world. Yi Xian couldn't help but ask, Miss Qin Guan, what are you writing? Qin Guan smiled. I am writing a record of rare treasures. I will write down all the divine items that I see. Yi Xian was quite curious. How many have you recorded? Qin Guan shook her head. Not many. Only 37 of them have been recorded so far. Yi Xian asked, are they ranked? Qin Guan nodded and smiled. Yes. This sword of yours is ranked at the 3rd position. The 3rd? Yi Xian was quite disgruntled when he heard this, and he waved his hand. Why is it only the 3rd position? I refuse to accept it. Soul suddenly said, I refuse to accept it. Qin Guan blinked and smiled. Do you know what the first and second position are? Yi Xian shook his head. We refuse to accept anything. We don't approve of your ranking. Qin Guan smiled delicately. Do you really not want to know what's ranked at the first and second position? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, I don't believe there's anything more formidable than the green profound sword. Qin Guan sized up the green profound sword and said, this sword is peerless indeed. However, there's still a gap when compared to the first and second positions. Yi Xian couldn't help but ask, what's the first position? Qin Guan flipped to a page and said, let's talk about the second position first. The second position is called the Daebi, and it's the sharpest divine item in the universe. A single stroke of its brush can determine the fate of all things in the universe. The tip of this brush is the sharpest known to the world, and it's even sharper than your sword. Its tip can easily tear apart a few tens of thousands of universes, and it's matchless. Besides that, this brush surpasses all Daos and techniques, and it will never fall into the cycle of reincarnation unless time strikes it. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he asked, it's that formidable? Qin Guan nodded. It's extremely, extremely formidable. Your current sword is unable to go against it. However, I can feel that the person who made this sword deliberately forged it to this extent in order to make it suitable for you to use. Yi Xian was silent for a moment, and then he said, is this the Daebi in your hands? Qin Guan smiled. Not in my hands, but I know where it is. Yi Xian was curious. Where? Qin Guan said, my hometown. Yi Xian was stunned. The Milky Way? Qin Guan nodded. Yes. Yi Xian was silent. Damn. Are there so many big shots in the Milky Way? Yi Xian collected his thoughts and asked again, what about the first position? Qin Guan blinked and said playfully, that's a secret for now. Yi Xian was speechless. Miss Qin Guan, it's not good to keep me in suspense. Qin Guan smiled and said, you'll know in the future. However, I can tell you that the first position is also in my hometown, the Milky Way. As she spoke, she began to record the Qingxian sword. At the side, Yi Xian was speechless. Keeping me in suspense, how wicked. He had to admit that he was getting more and more curious about the Milky Way. Thinking of this, Yi Xian could not help but ask, Miss Qin Guan, is this the Milky Way's martial arts civilization? Is it very advanced? Qin Guan stopped and shook her head. The martial arts civilization in the Milky Way is not advanced. On the contrary, the martial arts civilization in our place is very low level compared to this vast universe. However, there is a super big shot in that place. Therefore, the Milky Way has become a little special. Yi Xian was curious. What kind of super big shot? Qin Guan thought about it and said, I can't say, I can't say. Yi Xian's face darkened. She's keeping me in suspense again. After a while, Qin Guan closed the ancient book in front of her and said with a smile, done. Let's go to the meeting. As soon as she finished speaking, she put down her brush and walked out. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, should I go as well? Qin Guan smiled. Of course. You're a super VIP of my Celestial Treasure Pavilion. In theory, you're a member of my Celestial Treasure Pavilion as well. Yi Xian was speechless. After a while, Qin Guan led Yi Xian to a starry sky. This was a sealed starry sky, and there were over 1,700 people gathered here when he and Qin Guan arrived. Yi Xian noticed that most of the experts here had actually attained the quantitative change realm. Moreover, over 30 of them were unfathomable. This had obviously surpassed the quantitative change realm. What a grand scene! Yi Xian sighed softly. The Celestial Treasure Pavilion was even more terrifying than he'd imagined. The people here hurriedly bowed respectfully when they saw Qin Guan. "Greetings, Pavilion Master." Qin Guan smiled. "There's no need to be so polite. Everyone, sit." As soon as he finished speaking, an enormous long table appeared here, and all of them hurriedly sat around it. Qin Guan sat at the seat of the host, and then she seemed to have thought of something. She suddenly gazed at Yi Xian, who was still looking for a seat. "Young Master Yi, sit by my side." The expression of an old man by Qin Guan's side froze when he heard this. But he hurriedly stood up in the next moment, and then he grinned at Yi Xian. "Young Master Yi, please sit by my side." All of them gazed at Yi Xian with curiosity in their eyes. Yi Xian cupped his fists to the old man, and then he sat by Qin Guan's side. Qin Guan glanced at the old man and smiled. "Brother Zhang, you don't mind, right?" Brother Zhang hurriedly said, "Not at all, Pavilion Master. How could I mind such a trivial matter?" Qin Guan smiled tenderly. "I knew you wouldn't mind. That's why I asked him to sit at your seat. It's just a seat, and there's no other meaning. Don't think too much about it." Brother Zhang heaved a sigh of relief when she heard this, and she hurriedly said, "No. I won't." Qin Guan nodded. "Let's find a seat. We have something important to discuss." Meanwhile, a middle-aged man at the side hurriedly stood up and said, "Elder Zhang, please sit." Elder Zhang's status in the Immortal Treasure Pavilion was so high that it was only inferior to a few extraordinary elders that were hidden in the shadows. Elder Zhang glanced at the middle-aged man, nodded slightly, and then sat on the middle-aged man's seat. The middle-aged man was just about to look for a seat when a man beneath him hurriedly stood up. "Elder Jun, please sit at my seat." Yi Xian was speechless when he witnessed this scene. Qin Guan had a slight headache as well. She pressed lightly on her head and shook her head. "I know that there are ways of the world wherever there are people, but all of you have to act according to the situation. If you continue giving way like this, then you'll have to give way for another hour, right?" Everyone was speechless. Qin Guan took out a notebook from her small pouch, and then she said, "I gathered all of you here mainly for two things. Firstly, young Master Yi possessed my Azure token, but my subordinates disobeyed the rules I set. Not only did they refuse to help young Master Yi, they even plotted against him. Regarding this matter, all of you." Meanwhile, Brother Zhang suddenly spoke coldly, "Kill. These people disrespected the Pavilion Master and deserve to be killed. Yes. Kill. Disrespected the Pavilion Master. Slaughter 3 of their clans. No. Disrespecting the Pavilion Master is a grave crime. How could it be enough to slaughter 3 of their clans? Slaughter 9 of their clans. I'll listen to the Pavilion Master. Whatever the Pavilion Master says, the Pavilion Master is wise and valiant. He is skilled in both literature and martial arts. He will live for thousands of years and unify the universe. Long live the Pavilion Master. Long live the Pavilion Master, the Pavilion Master is awesome." Yi Xian was dumbfounded by this scene. Chapter 2202. Yi Xian was speechless when he witnessed this scene. He'd seen flatterers, but he'd never seen flatterers in such a way. These fellows are too shameless. Moreover, all of them are extraordinary experts. Qin Guan, who stood by Yi Xian's side, slapped her forehead lightly with her right hand. "My head hurts." Yi Xian was speechless. The others were still flattering Yi Xian without end, and they seemed to have no intention of stopping. Meanwhile, Qin Guan suddenly slapped the table with her right hand. Bang! In an instant, everyone stopped what they were doing. Qin Guan glared at them and said, "From this moment onward, all of you better be serious." Everyone hurriedly nodded. Qin Guan spoke indifferently. "Has Yu Xian, who plotted against young Master Yi, been sentenced?" Brother Zhang hurriedly said, "He's been killed." Qin Guan gazed at Brother Zhang. Brother Zhang smiled embarrassedly. "He's been sentenced. Disobeying the pavilion master's orders is the #1 crime of my celestial treasure pavilion, and he deserves death. He deserves death. Qin Guan remained silent for a moment before she nodded slightly, and then she turned around to look at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, my celestial treasure pavilion is in the wrong. We gave you the black sky token, yet we didn't allow you to enjoy the rights you deserve. I represent the Celestial Treasure Pavilion to express our sincerest apologies for this, and I hope you can forgive us. Yi Xian fell silent. Qin Guan said, there will be compensation. Yi Xian immediately said, of course, of course. It's just a small matter, and it's not worth mentioning. I'm not the type of person to fuss about it. Everyone was speechless. Qin Guan rolled her eyes at Yi Xian, and then she flipped to the next page. She said, next up is a very important matter. I hope everyone will listen carefully. A very chaotic era is coming. A very chaotic era. Everyone frowned slightly when they heard this, and they didn't understand what she meant. Yi Xian was a little curious. Miss Qin Guan, what chaotic era? Qin Guan sighed softly. I only found out not long ago that the forbidden land of the ruins of God has been destroyed. Forbidden area of the ruins of God. The others in the surroundings frowned slightly when they heard this because they'd never heard of it. Yi Xian had never heard of it either. Qin Guan said, the universe is very big, so big that it has no end. Therefore, everyone only knows that they are in the universe, but they don't know where they are in the universe. Now, I will explain the background of this world in detail so that everyone can have a clear understanding of this universe. As she spoke, she flipped to the next page and continued, with the vast 1,000 domains as the center, I headed north of this world. After crossing trillions of light years, I still haven't reached the end of the universe. However, I saw an ancient ruin. According to my investigation, this ruin was at least trillions of years ago. Billions of years ago. All the spectators were dumbstruck when they heard this. Yi Xian was also shocked. An ancient civilization that existed trillions of years ago. Qin Guan continued, being in such a complicated universe, we have no idea what stage we are in the history of this universe. Any living being in this universe seems extremely tiny. When she spoke up to hear, she shook her head slightly. Countless ancestors of my hometown once studied this starry sky universe. We once worked hard to allow our people to enter the starry sky universe and explore this unknown universe. However, the further we went, the more we realized how tiny we were. Because our blue planet isn't even a speck of dust in the universe, no, in the Milky Way galaxy. Everyone fell silent. Yi Xian suddenly asked, what's outside the ancient ruin? Qin Guan smiled and said, it's still the boundless universe. Yi Xian fell silent. Qin Guan continued, many cultivators often say that the martial Tao has no end. Actually, I think it's the universe that has no end. Since the universe has no end, it means that everything is unknown, and the unknown means that everything is possible. So, the Tao has no end. As she spoke, she flipped to another page and said, I've organized the universe that I know of, and I've named the universe that I know of, universe visualization. All of them had strange expressions on their faces when they heard this. Qin Guan blinked, I spent a huge amount of time exploring and searching. So, it's not too much to name it after me, right? All of them hurriedly shook their heads. It's not too much. Yi Xian suddenly said, Miss Qin Guan, I think you can add a word to it. Qin Guan was quite curious. What word? Yi Xian said seriously, universe visualization. Qin Guan's eyes blinked. This, Yi Xian said seriously, universe visualization sounds better. Everyone's expressions grew even more strange. This kid is so shameless. Qin Guan was slightly hesitant. This, Yi Xian sighed softly, if Miss Qin Guan feels that it's difficult, then forget it. Qin Guan immediately said, "All right." Yi Xian's expression froze. "I'm not done." Qin Guan glanced at Yi Xian. "You didn't do anything. Traversing stellar regions is very tiring." Yi Xian sighed softly, "All right. If you feel that it's difficult, then forget it. In any case, this universe has nothing to do with me, Yi Xian. Guarding the universe is very tiring indeed, and it's strenuous and unrewarding." Qin Guan suddenly said, "Let's call it universe visualization." Everyone was speechless. Yi Xian frowned slightly. "You don't feel that it's difficult?" Qin Guan giggled, "It's just a name." Yi Xian fell silent. He suddenly felt that he hadn't gained anything. Something was wrong. Qin Guan continued, "The universe visualization is divided into 3 regions. The most powerful force in the northern region is the Forbidden Land. The Forbidden Land's martial arts civilization is advanced, and it has the highest known realm of the universe, the visualization realm." Everyone's expressions froze. Could it be that the Pavilion Master named it herself? Qin Guan smiled, "I named it, and the Pavilion Master has already agreed. This realm was modified by me, and the Pavilion Master's strength has risen to the next level under my guidance. Therefore, the highest realm of the universe visualization is the visualization realm. As for the other realms, I will tell you about them in detail later, because I have already sorted out the current realms." As she spoke, she shook her head slightly. "Not only are there many realms in the universe visualization, but they are also very messy. Therefore, I have already sorted them out. The unnecessary realms will be deleted, and the useful ones will be kept. Some useful realms will also be combined with other realms to form a new realm. When the time comes, I will announce it to the entire universe visualization. Apart from that, I also wrote a book called Book of Observation. This book records the cultivation methods of each realm in detail, as well as their unique features, so that cultivators can better understand each realm." Below, old Zhang hurriedly asked, "Pavilion Master, are you selling this book?" Hearing this, all the presidents instantly became excited. If they were to sell it, wouldn't the Celestial Treasure Pavilion make a killing? However, Qin Guan shook his head. "I'm not selling." Hearing this, everyone was stunned. Qin Guan said seriously, "This kind of thing benefits the entire Guanxian cosmos, it can't be measured with money." As she spoke, she glanced at the guild masters present, and then he said, "Remember, those who are rich enough to rival a country, if they don't have benevolence and do whatever they want, exploiting the people, then they are rich but heartless. Those who are rich but heartless, no matter how much wealth they have, are just slaves to money." At this point, her tone became more serious. "I don't care about outsiders, but since you respect me, then you must do as I say. Money is important, but virtue is more important. A gentleman loves money, but he must obtain it in the right way." Yi Xian glanced at Qin Guan and nodded slightly. "This woman's values are as righteous as mine." The Celestial Treasure Pavilion branch presidents nodded, expressing their agreement with Qin Guan's words. Qin Guan continued, "Has President Meng Meng of the Forbidden Land arrived?" At this moment, an old man hurriedly said, "Pavilion Master, not yet. The Forbidden Land is too far from the boundless thousand domains, and President Meng Meng is still on her way." After a moment of silence, Qin Guan said, "I have already planned to build a teleportation array between the 3 domains and the boundless thousand domains. There are no problems in terms of funds or technology, but," at this point, she looked at Yi Xian, "Young Master Yi, I was worried about this before, but after seeing the sword in your hand, I made a new discovery. As far as I know, your sword can freely travel through space, right?" Yi Xian nodded, "That's right." Qin Guan praised, "The person who made this sword has unfathomable attainments in space and time. She reminded me that space and time can be homogenized. I have to say, it's really awesome." As she spoke, her small face blushed. When I'm excited, my words are too vulgar. He. Yi Xian was speechless. Qin Guan continued, I have already understood the mystery of your sword ignoring space and time, so there is no problem in terms of technology. However, because this homogenization of space and time was not my idea, I am embarrassed to directly use it in my teleportation array. Young Master Yi, how about this? You lend me this technology, and I will give you 30% of the profits of the teleportation array every year. 30%. Yi Xian blinked, how much? Qin Guan thought for a moment, then said, there should be a minimum of 1 billion star god veins every year. Yi Xian was stunned at first, but the next moment, he quickly said, deal. Qin Guan blinked, do you want to ask the person who made this sword first? Yi Xian quickly shook his head, no, I agree. Qing will not have any other opinions. Moreover, her invention is equivalent to my invention. Qin Guan nodded slightly, then turned to look at a young woman not far away, go and draw up a contract. The woman quickly got up and retreated. Yi Xian frowned slightly, do we still need to sign a contract? Qin Guan smiled, of course. Yi Xian's face darkened, you don't believe me. Of course I don't. Qin Guan was straightforward and almost said what she thought, but she reacted quickly and quickly changed her words, of course I believe young Master Yi, this contract is just a formality, a formality. Yi Xian, at this time, Xiaofan suddenly said, young master, really, not to mention this pavilion Master Qin, even I don't believe you. Sometimes when you are shameless, can you still be called a human? Let's not talk about other things, just look at how many inheritances you have tricked along the way. You walk into a secret realm ruin and ask people if they have an inheritance? How can you be so thick-skinned? Yi Xian's face darkened, Xiaofan, you are really bold, how dare you scold Qing, F***ck, Xiaofan jumped up, you. Chapter 2203. Xiaofan didn't dare to speak anymore. If he continued, he was afraid that he would be played to death. He, this young lord, was no longer a human. Qin Guan continued, the northern region is the strongest, and it's the Forbidden Land. As for the strength of the Forbidden Land, I won't say much. Because it wouldn't take long for everyone to find out. Let me tell everyone about the southern region. There are 4 strongest forces in the southern region. The first is the Time Court, whose master is the master of time and controls the Tao of time. The second is the 5 Elements Palace, whose masters are the 5 lords who control the Tao of 5 elements. Actually, as far as I know, he controls more than just the Tao of 5 elements. As she spoke, she flipped to the next page of the notebook and continued, the other 2 are the Law Master and Tao Master. They control at least 70% of the Tao laws and laws of the dark observing cosmos. They are both very powerful, second only to the one in the Forbidden Land. Yi Xian was curious. Who is the strongest among the 4? Qin Guan smiled. It should be the Tao Master who controls 70% of the Tao laws of the world. Yi Xian nodded slightly and didn't say anything else. Qin Guan said, the other 2 super forces are the primordial sect founded by the primordial immortal lord of the western region, and the master of the vast 1,000 domains, 1,000 Chant City. At this point, she smiled and continued, these forces are the strongest forces in the dark observing cosmos. These forces are very far away from each other, so there are no conflicts for the time being. In addition, there are some hidden aristocratic families. However, they have been in seclusion for at least tens of thousands of years, so I won't reveal them and cause trouble for them. Yi Xian suddenly asked, what about the eastern region? Qin Guan's expression suddenly became somewhat solemn. There used to be a super force in the eastern region called the Land of Divine Ruins, but now it has been destroyed. Yi Xian frowned. Destroyed? Qin Guan nodded. At the end of the eastern region, that race is coming. Yi Xian said solemnly, what race? Qin Guan said softly, the Tao race, from the burial ground. Yi Xian frowned slightly. The Tao race? Qin Guan nodded. They use Tao as their surname and control thousands of Taos. They claim to be a race that is infinitely close to God. At this point, she glanced at Yi Xian. In this race, there is someone with the same special identity as you. That person's identity is no weaker than yours. At this moment, Xiaofan suddenly said, Big sister, this isn't right, right? Young Lord is a person of destiny, so there shouldn't be anyone with a more special identity than him. Qin Guan smiled and said, under normal circumstances, it's indeed impossible. But, who said that the mandate of heaven can't die? Xiaofan said in a deep voice, if the person of destiny dies, then what's the point of playing with the hammer? Qin Guan shook his head and smiled, Xiaofan, you are still too young to understand. There were two situations in which a person with the mandate of heaven would die. The first was when the next person with the mandate of heaven appeared, because after the next person with the mandate of heaven appeared, he would no longer be the only one. During this period of time, if he didn't have invincible strength, he would most likely die. The reason why Uncle Yang is fine is because when young Master Yi appeared, he was already invincible in the world. Almost no one can kill him. At this point, she glanced at Yi Xian. If you haven't reached Uncle Yang's strength before the next person of destiny appears, then you may die. Hearing this, Yi Xian was silent. At this moment, he suddenly understood what Qin and his father were worried about. Qin Guan continued, there's another situation where the person with the mandate of heaven will die. That is, he is no longer the only person with the mandate of heaven. It is possible for two people with the mandate of heaven to appear in a world. At this point, she paused and said, of course, under normal circumstances, it's not very possible. But, it doesn't mean it's impossible. That depends on the pen. Yi Xian frowned slightly, what pen? Qin Guan smiled, the Daobi. The real terrifying thing about it isn't its strength, but its ability to write the fate of all living things. Therefore, it is also called the pen of destiny. It is very powerful. If it were to act up one day, you would be in deep trouble. He. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then said, why are you laughing? It seems like you are taking pleasure in my misfortune. Qin Guan blinked, really? Yi Xian nodded seriously. Qin Guan grinned, don't bother about such a small problem. Yi Xian was speechless. Qin Guan continued, do you remember that I said there are 4 types of people that can threaten you? Yi Xian nodded, tell me more about it. Qin Guan said, the first type is someone who is also a person of destiny. It's like a king of a world going to another world. Isn't it very easy for the king of the other world to kill him? Yi Xian nodded, what about the other 3 types? Qin Guan said, top big shots. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, what kind of top big shots? Qin Guan smiled, your father. Yi Xian was speechless. Qin Guan grinned, if they reach Uncle Yang's level, Uncle Yang will not be able to stop them if they want to kill you. Once such a strong person targets someone weaker than him, the other party will have no chance of survival. Yi Xian nodded slightly, what about the other 2 types? Qin Guan whispered, people outside the rules. Yi Xian frowned slightly, people outside the rules? What do you mean? Qin Guan thought for a while, then said, in our place, it's called loopholes. Nothing is perfect. There are loopholes, and some loopholes are outside the rules. You might not understand it if I tell you this. I know someone outside the rules. You should know him too. Yi Xian asked hurriedly, who? Qin Guan smiled, a swordsman in a cloud-white robe. He is a person outside the rules. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression froze. Big brother. Big brother is outside the rules? Yi Xian asked in his heart, Xiaofan, do you think she's right? Xiao Ta was silent for a while, then said, "Anyway, Big Brother Xiao Yao is really unreasonably strong in my life. He seeks to fight all his life because he can't be defeated, so he always seeks to be defeated." Yi Xian was silent. Outside the rules. Qin Guan continued, "This kind of person is unreasonably strong." Yi Xian looked at Qin Guan, "Besides Big Brother Xiao Yao, is there anyone else outside the rules?" Qin Guan nodded, "There is. And, I know who it is." Yi Xian frowned slightly, "Who? That Dao clan?" Qin Guan shook his head, "That's not it. The one from Dao clan is not outside the rules. The one from Dao clan is a heaven-defying being." Yi Xian looked at Qin Guan, "A heaven-defying being?" Qin Guan nodded, "This kind of person is called a variable. This kind of person is a heaven-defying being the moment they appear. Under normal circumstances, from the birth of a universe to its destruction, this kind of person may not appear. Variable." Yi Xian glanced at Qin Guan, then said, "What kind of existence is Qing, or?" Qin Guan said in a low voice, "The Qing you are talking about, is it Tianming?" Yi Xian smiled, "You know her?" Qin Guan's lips curled up, "Of course, besides writing the Exotic World Treasure Record, I also wrote the Exotic World Big Boss List. Tianming is so powerful, so she must be recorded in it. However, because I have never come into contact with her, I am not particularly clear on how strong she is." Yi Xian smiled, "Make an estimate." Qin Guan was silent for a moment, then said, "I won't say." Yi Xian's expression froze, "Why?" Qin Guan blinked, "I just won't say." Yi Xian was speechless. Qin Guan smiled, "Don't be depressed. I naturally have my reasons for not saying. Don't be angry, okay?" Yi Xian shook his head, smiling, "I'm not angry, I'm just a little curious." Qin Guan smiled and said, "After I finish writing this Alien World's Big Shots ranking list, I can show it to you first, because I have made a ranking in it. At that time, you will know who is number one." Yi Xian smiled, "That's a deal." Qin Guan nodded, "Deal." At this time, Xiao Ta suddenly said, "Sis, what kind of existence are you? I think you are also very powerful." Qin Guan shook her head, smiling, "I am not powerful, I am just an ordinary descendant of the Yellow Emperor. I like to explore the universe, like to study the universe, like to play around, I can't compare to these big bosses. Moreover, I don't like fighting and killing. I don't particularly like the law of the jungle in this world, but there is nothing I can do about it, because this world is like this. It is easy to change the world, but people's hearts are hard to change." Yi Xian was silent. He had to admit that this woman in front of him was indeed a little special. She was very thoughtful. Qin Guan smiled, and then he glanced at everyone present. "I have gathered everyone here mainly for the second matter, because according to what I know, the Tao race has entered the Dark Temple cosmos with ill intentions, and it won't be long before a great calamity may befall this Dark Temple cosmos, so everyone must be mentally prepared." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "What does the Tao race intend to do?" Qin Guan said softly, "Dominate, of course, and take revenge." Yi Xian frowned slightly, "Dominate the Dark Temple cosmos?" Qin Guan smiled, "That's not all, according to what I know, they have a higher goal, and dominating the Dark Temple cosmos is merely their first step." Yi Xian looked at Qin Guan, "Will you stop them?" Qin Guan fell silent. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "You won't stop them?" After a moment of silence, Qin Guan said, "In the past, there were billions of people in the Tao race, and there were about 30 million peak powerhouses. But now, there are less than 30 million people in the Tao race, and there are less than 1 million peak powerhouses. Do you know why this is?" Yi Xian shook his head. Qin Guan said softly, "I have investigated the past. Back then, the top forces of the Dark Temple cosmos joined forces to slaughter the Tao race and snatched their supreme divine item, the Tao scripture. The heavenly vein is a divine item in the Tao scripture. As she said that, she looked at Yi Xian and sighed. Back then, in order to snatch that divine item, they slaughtered billions of people. Back then, the Tao race patriarch and a few of their supreme powerhouses used their lives to escort the few survivors of the Tao race into the burial ground, and before they died, countless youths of the Tao race swore with their blood that as long as the Tao race is not wiped out, they will definitely take revenge. If this generation can't take revenge, then the next generation will. If the next generation can't take revenge, then the next generation will. As she said that, she sighed again. Everything has its cause and effect. The current calamity of the Dark Temple cosmos is because of the sins they committed back then. Yi Xian said in a low voice, the celestial treasure pavilion is so rich. What if they want to rob your celestial treasure pavilion? What will you do? Qin Guan was expressionless, and she directly took out a large pile of "Don't talk about martial ethics. When Eggy appears, your parents raised him for nothing." Yi Xian. Chapter 2204. Looking at the two balls, Yi Xian was speechless. Is this the power of money? Qin Guan continued with the meeting. Yi Xian sat aside and listened quietly. He had to admit that he was quite shocked. Because these chairmen from all over the world were reporting the annual income of the celestial treasure pavilions they were in, and Yi Xian discovered that the celestial treasure pavilion with the lowest income had at least 1 billion star divine veins every year. What did that mean? After all, there were more than 1,000 presidents here. Moreover, the annual income of some celestial treasure pavilions reached tens of billions of star god veins. After deducting the cost, they could earn more than half. Most importantly, Qin Guan had said before that she had opened tens of millions of celestial treasure pavilions. Rich woman. Yi Xian could not imagine Qin Guan's wealth. This woman's wealth could only be compared to Little White in the Milky Way. Even Little White might not be able to compare. After all, Little White was an individual, but Qin Guan was different. This woman had many people to help her earn money. Thinking of this, he could not help but shake his head and sigh. Qing was good at everything, but she was not very interested in money. Otherwise, with Qing ability to earn money, Qing After a long time, Qin Guan suddenly said, dividends. Dividends. As soon as she said this, the president's present became excited. Everyone's eyes were filled with excitement and joy. Even Elder Zhang, who was like an old monk, had a subtle change of expression at this moment. Qin Guan suddenly looked at a woman not far from her. The woman was wearing a simple long dress. Her appearance was average, but her temperament was outstanding. Qin Guan smiled. Fu Qing, this time, the celestial treasure pavilion under your jurisdiction has the highest profit. You are this year's top seller. As she spoke, she took out a storage ring and placed it in front of Fu Qing. Everyone scanned it with their divine senses. The next moment, they were all excited, and their eyes were filled with undisguised envy. There were 3 billion star god veins in the storage ring. 3 billion. This was a super huge amount of money. When Yi Xian saw this amount, he was shocked at first, then shocked. 3 billion. How many people wouldn't be able to earn so many star god veins in their entire lives, but this Qin Guan actually rewarded them just like that. Fu Qing was also excited. It was obvious that the reward had exceeded her expectations. She immediately stood up and bowed slightly, before saying with a trembling voice, "Thank you, Pavilion Master." Qin Guan asked again, "Are you in the quantitative change state now?" Fu Qing nodded. "Yes." Qin Guan nodded slightly. Quantitative change leads to qualitative change. This process isn't that simple. As she spoke, she opened her palm, and a scroll slowly floated in front of Fu Qing. This scroll contains some of my understanding of the qualitative change realm. It will be helpful to you. The expressions of all the presidents changed drastically when they heard this, and countless stood up. After all, the reason they joined the Celestial Treasure Pavilion was to earn money, but what was the purpose of earning money? Cultivate. Other than money, cultivation techniques were also very important. But now, Qin Guan directly rewarded him with a cultivation technique. It could be said that it was only a matter of time before Fu Qing reached the realm of qualitative change. Countless people were envious. Even those presidents who'd attained the quantitative change state were slightly envious. After all, they'd really had to rely on themselves to find their way bit by bit before they'd met Qin Guan all those years ago. Yet now, Qin Guan had directly provided them with guidance, so they'd be able to avoid many detours. It was truly too difficult to rely on oneself on the path of life without guidance from a noble person. Fu Qing immediately knelt down when she heard Qin Guan, and she was extremely excited and spoke with a trembling voice, "Pavilion Master, I." Qin Guan helped Fu Qing up and smiled. "According to my knowledge, the Celestial Treasure Pavilion that you manage doesn't just earn the most profits, it has the best reputation as well. You deserve it." Fu Qing bowed deeply. "Thank you, Pavilion Master." Qin Guan nodded slightly, and then she glanced at the others and said, "Meeting adjourned." All of them stood up, bowed slightly, and then left. Meanwhile, a woman walked over to Yi Xian and grinned. "Young Master Yi, do you still remember me?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Of course, Miss Qinglian." Qinglian smiled sweetly. "Young Master Yi, it's been 3 days, but you've become much stronger than before." Yi Xian laughed heartily. Qinglian glanced at Qin Guan, who was sitting at the side, bowed deeply, and then left. Qin Guan turned to look at Yi Xian and said with a smile, "I'll be busy for about 3 days. How about you go and play by yourself first?" Yi Xian smiled. "You said before that there'll be compensation. Do you still remember?" Qin Guan nodded. "What do you want?" Hearing this, Yi Xian was instantly in a dilemma. What should I want? Money? I'm in need of it. Treasures? He indeed coveted Qin Guan's treasures. Qin Guan suddenly smiled. "Why don't you remember it first, and let me know when you've thought of what you need?" Yi Xian nodded. "Sure." Qin Guan smiled faintly, then picked up the thick notebook in front of her. "I'll be busy for a while. After that, I'll take you to a place." With that, she turned and left. Yi Xian glanced at Qin Guan's small cloth bag, not knowing what he was thinking. Xiao Ta suddenly said, "Young master, don't think about this cloth bag. We really can't beat her. Just listening to the treasures of this little sister makes my scalp go numb." Yi Xian's face darkened. "What are you talking about? Am I that kind of person?" With that, he turned and left. Stroll around. Yi Xian decided to stroll around the vast 1,000 domains. He had to admit that the vast 1,000 domains was indeed very prosperous. In the starry sky, there was an endless stream of people coming and going. In the dark, he sensed some hidden auras, and each aura was very strong. Yi Xian slowly strolled alone in the starry sky, deep in thought. What Qin Guan said previously had deeply touched her. Unknown. From Qin Guan, he learned some unknown information, such as the Tao brush, the people who did not follow the rules, the heaven-defying cultivators, the person with the mandate of heaven, and Qing, suppressing a certain existence in the Milky Way. Yi Xian sighed softly. "I need to work harder. If I don't work hard now, I'm afraid I'll have to rely on Dad and Qing, in the future." Moreover, he now somewhat understood Dad's intention. He also understood what Dad was worried about. As Qin Guan said, there was more than one chosen one, and it didn't mean that the chosen one would not die. Of course, he wasn't interested in this so-called chosen one, but he also knew that the saying, "My fate is in my own hands, not the heavens," was a complete nonsense. How many people in this world could really do that? At least, he couldn't do it at the moment. And Qing, with Qing, undefeatable strength, he could only suppress the other party. Whether he could not kill him or not, it meant that things were getting more complicated. If he didn't work hard now, his head might be smashed in the future. At this moment, Yi Xian, who was deep in thought, suddenly turned around and saw a man and a woman walking towards him. He had seen this man before. It was Qian Ji. And the most powerful force in the vast thousand domains was Qian Ji City. Obviously, this child Qian Ji was the young governor of Qian Ji City. Qian Ji walked towards Yi Xian and smiled. "Young Master Yi, we meet again." Yi Xian smiled. "It can't be such a coincidence, right?" Qian Ji nodded. "To be honest, I'm here to get to know young Master Yi." Yi Xian laughed. "Child Qian Ji doesn't want to get to know me. You just want to know my relationship with Pavilion Master Qin, right?" Qian Ji was stunned for a moment before he smiled and said, "Has Mr. Yi always been so direct?" Yi Xian smiled. "Pavilion Master Qin and I are friends." Friends. Of course, he knew what Qian Ji was trying to do. Qian Ji must have seen him getting close to Qin Guan. Qian Ji squinted his eyes. "From what I know, Pavilion Master Qin rarely makes friends." Yi Xian shrugged. "I don't know about that." Qian Ji kept quiet. Yi Xian smiled. "Child Qian Ji, I have something to attend to. Let's talk later." After that, he turned around and left. After Yi Xian left, the woman beside Qian Ji asked in a deep voice, "Cousin, who is this person?" Qian Ji shook his head. "I don't know." The woman asked, "Do you want to investigate?" Qian Ji kept quiet for a while. The woman understood. She turned around and left. In the starry sky far away, Xiaofan suddenly asked, "Young master, is Qian Ji wooing Sister Qin?" Yi Xian said with a smile, "Why do you ask?" Xiaofan smiled. "I don't think he will be able to woo Sister Qin." Yi Xian was puzzled. "Why?" Xiaofan said, "Sister Qin's thoughts and pursuits are not something that people in this world can understand. It's just like Sister Yang Lianshuang." Yi Xian frowned. "Aunt?" Xiaofan said, "Yes. She's also from the Milky Way." Yi Xian smiled. "If there's a chance in the future, let's go to the Milky Way." Xiaofan smiled. "All right." Yi Xian smiled. He had to admit that he was quite curious about the Milky Way. The people in this place were quite strange, especially this Qin Guan. His thoughts were really strange. Yi Xian was about to speak when he narrowed his eyes and suddenly turned around. Not far behind him stood a middle-aged man. He knew this man too. It was Mu Su, the patriarch of the Spirit Demon clan. Not far behind Mu Su, there were two extremely obscure auras. Moreover, they were both in the quantitative change realm. Yi Xian frowned. The other party was really powerful. He actually chased them all the way here. However, he was puzzled. He was with Qin Guan back then. Even if the other party wasn't afraid of him, he should at least be wary of Qin Guan. Could it be that he didn't know Qin Guan? At this moment, Mu Su suddenly said, "That vein of the sky." Vein of the sky. Yi Xian smiled. "It's with me." He didn't study the vein of the sky himself. Instead, he gave it to Enlancio to study. If he didn't dote on his own woman, who would? He believed that Enlancio's strength would advance by leaps and bounds before long and reach new heights. Enlancio's talent and perseverance were top-notch. She just lacked something to cheat. Mu Su stared at Yi Xian. Yi Xian suddenly grinned. "Don't stare at me. Come and hit me if you have the guts." "You don't say, I haven't been hit in a long time. I'm really not used to it." Xiao Ta. Chapter 2205. Mu Su's expression instantly turned gloomy when he heard Yi Xian. How arrogant! How arrogant! Mu Su stared at Yi Xian with seemingly material killing intent in his eyes. You don't know what it means at all. Just you wait. You'll regret it. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Yi Xian suddenly said, "What are you waiting for? If you're not happy today, then let's fight. Die." As soon as he finished speaking, he flicked his thumb lightly. "Ohm!" A sword howl resounded abruptly, and then a sword slashed towards Mu Su's back. Mu Su's eyes narrowed slightly while a strand of killing intent flashed through them. He suddenly turned around and smashed his fist forward. Bang! A strand of dazzling light surged out from his fist, and then the space in the surroundings transformed into an enormous black vortex. Yi Xian's sword was forcefully blocked by this punch. Mu Su stared fixedly at Yi Xian, and then he stomped his right foot against the ground and twisted his right hand. Bang! The green profound sword was instantly blasted flying. Yi Xian opened his palm, and the green profound sword flew steadily back into his palm. Meanwhile, a fist suddenly swept over, and the formidable force contained within it caused the starry sky here to become illusory. Yi Xian held his sword in a reverse grip, charged forward, and slashed down. Bang! The fist was instantly blasted into pieces, but he himself was blasted 3 kilometers away as well. Their battle caused a huge commotion, and it instantly drew the attention of countless experts. Meanwhile, a black-robed old man appeared between them, and he glanced coldly at Yi Xian and Mu Su. Don't both of you know that fighting isn't allowed here? Mu Su opened his palm, and then a command token floated slowly towards the black-robed old man. The black-robed old man frowned slightly when he saw the command token. The 5 Elements Order. A member of the Lord of 5 Elements. I have to give the Lord of 5 Elements face. When he thought up to here, the black-robed old man turned around to gaze at Yi Xian, and he spoke coldly, "Take him down." As his voice fell, more than a dozen powerful auras suddenly swept toward Yi Xian from the dark. Yi Xian frowned slightly when he saw this, and he didn't waste his breath as he drew his sword and slashed. Boom! This sword strike directly sent an expert charging in front of him flying several thousand feet away. The experts in the dark were shocked when they witnessed this scene. How dare they attack the people of Qinji City? Was he tired of living? Opposite Yi Xian, the black-robed elder's face immediately turned cold. He glared at Yi Xian and said, "Who gave you the guts?" As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly charged forward. An afterimage flashed through the battlefield, and the powerful force he emanated tore the space in his path apart. In the distance, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and a cold murderous intent flashed across his eyes. With a thought, the green profound sword in his scabbard turned into a sword ray and flew out. Quantitative change. Even though his cultivation wasn't at the quantitative change realm, this attack of his had undergone quantitative change. So, the starry sky in the surroundings instantly cracked apart as soon as he attacked. Rumble. The afterimage shook violently, and then it instantly retreated 3 kilometers away. However, a flying sword suddenly slashed down towards him as soon as he stopped moving. The black-robed old man's pupils constricted, and then he crossed his arms and placed them before him. Bang! An expanse of sword light was blasted apart, and then the black-robed old man was blasted flying again. When he finally stopped moving, his arms had been slashed into pieces. The black-robed old man was slightly stunned. He gazed towards the distance and was just about to speak when a sword was pressed against the center of his forehead. Mu Su's face instantly turned gloomy when he witnessed this scene. Yi Xian's strength is much stronger than before. Earlier, it was very strenuous for Yi Xian to fight quantitative change realm experts. Yet now, quantitative change realm experts are practically unable to fight back against Yi Xian. How did this fellow's strength grow so quickly? In front of Yi Xian, the old man in the black robe stared at Yi Xian, this is Qianji City, try and touch me. Yi Xian frowned slightly, what makes you think that I wouldn't dare to touch you? A ferocious smile arose on the corners of the black-robed old man's mouth, then try and see if you dare. Meanwhile, a voice resounded from the side, young Master Yi, this is a misunderstanding. Yi Xian turned around and saw a man and woman walking over slowly from afar. It was Qianji. Qianji had a faint smile on his face, young Master Yi, this is a misunderstanding. We. Yi Xian suddenly swung his sword. Hiss. The black-robed old man's head flew into the air, and his soul was instantly absorbed by the green profound sword. The air here instantly froze when they witnessed this scene. He really killed him. Moreover, he even stopped the junior city governor of Thousand Opportunities City. The smile on Qianji's face froze as well. Yi Xian looked at Qianji and smiled, young Master Qianji, would you believe me if I told you that this is a misunderstanding? Qianji looked at Yi Xian, I thought that young Master Yi was a friend, but it seems like I was wrong. Yi Xian chuckled, young Master Qianji, don't put on an act in front of me. It's true. I'm so embarrassed that I feel like I'm about to explode. Don't tell me that you just found out about this from the beginning of the battle. If I'm not wrong, you've been hiding in the dark since I fought with your men. But you didn't stop me or say that it's a misunderstanding. Why? There are 2 reasons. Firstly, you wanted to see my strength and background. Secondly, you just wanted to cause trouble for me because I'm close to Qingguan. That made you uncomfortable. Qianji shook his head and smiled, you might not be angry at me for killing him now. On the contrary, you might be happy about it. Why is that? Because in that case, you would have a legitimate reason to target me. Moreover, not only do you have a legitimate reason to go against me, you're also standing on the moral high ground. Even Miss Qingguan wouldn't be able to stop you. Or perhaps, when you see Miss Qingguan later, you might even complain about it or act pitiful. By then, you don't even need to do anything to make Miss Qingguan hate me. Am I right? Qianji looked at Yi Xian without saying a word. The lady beside Qianji suddenly said coldly, who do you think you are? Are you worthy of being targeted by my cousin? What a joke. As for Pavilion Leader Qin, it's her honor that my cousin likes her. But she still wants to pretend. We're both women, I don't know that. Shut up. Qianji suddenly shouted and stopped the lady. The lady was stunned. Meanwhile, a voice sounded from the side, young Master Yi is a distinguished guest of my celestial treasure pavilion, a super distinguished guest. Qianji's expression changed drastically when he heard that. All the spectators turned around to look, and they saw a woman walking over slowly from afar. It was Qingguan. There were 2 other people by Qingguan's side. One of them was Elder Zhang, and the other was a slender woman in black armor. The woman had a long saber hanging from her waist, and her expression was cold. Qianji quickly went over to greet Qingguan when he saw her, Pavilion Leader Qin, my cousin has offended you with her words. Please forgive her. Qingguan grinned, I won't forgive her. As soon as she finished speaking, she looked at the woman by Qingguan's side. The woman didn't back down and looked Qingguan in the eye. Suddenly, the woman by Qingguan's side vanished on the spot. In the next moment, Qianji's expression changed drastically. He was about to attack when the woman's head flew into the air. Blood sprayed out like a fountain, and it was extremely bloody. Everyone in the surroundings was flabbergasted. She killed him just like that? Yi Xian's face was covered in astonishment as well. He wasn't shocked because the armored woman had killed the other woman, he was shocked because of her strength. It was too absurd. Because he hadn't been able to react in time. What sort of heaven-defying strength is that? Qianji was completely dumbfounded. She really killed him. He hadn't expected that Qingguan's subordinates would actually not give him any face at all. After all, she was his cousin's sister, and she was from Thousand Opportunity City. Qin Guan rolled his eyes at her. "Shenxiu, I didn't ask you to kill him." The woman called Shenxiu hesitated for a moment and said, "That saber was too swift. I couldn't stop it." The others were speechless. Qianji suddenly spoke in a low voice, "Pavilion leader Qin, I've always respected you, but your actions today show that you're looking down on my Thousand Opportunity City. You must give my Thousand Opportunity City an explanation, otherwise." Suddenly, Qianji's voice stopped abruptly because a saber had been placed against his neck. Qianji's expression changed drastically, and he was horrified to the extreme. He wasn't able to fight back at all. Exactly how terrifying is this woman called Shenxiu? Yi Xian was extremely shocked as well because this woman called Shenxiu's strength was slightly absurd. Her saber was too swift. "Show mercy." Suddenly, a voice resounded from afar, and then a middle-aged man tore through space and appeared before everyone. It was the city governor of Thousand Opportunity City, Qian Mu. After he appeared here, Qian Mu didn't even spare a glance at Qianji as he walked swiftly towards Qin Guan, and then he cupped his fists. "Pavilion leader Qin, my son has offended you. Please be magnanimous and forgive him this time. I'll definitely discipline him strictly once I bring him back." Everyone here was shocked when they heard this. Qian Mu is actually apologizing? Actually, many didn't know much about Qin Guan. They only knew that the Immortal Treasure Pavilion was extremely wealthy, but they didn't know the exact strength of the Immortal Treasure Pavilion. In the eyes of many, the Immortal Treasure Pavilion was just a merchant group. That wasn't wrong, but it wasn't just a merchant group, it was a merchant group that dealt with technology. Qin Guan gazed at Qian Mu and smiled, "It's actually a small matter to me because I won't get angry with them. However, all of you have offended my friend." As she spoke, she turned around to look at Yi Xian. "Are you still angry?" Yi Xian nodded. Qin Guan thought for a moment and said, "Are you really angry?" Yi Xian nodded again. Qin Guan nodded slightly, and then he gazed at Qian Mu. "City Governor Qian Mu, please lend me something." Qian Mu stared fixedly at Qin Guan. "What do you want to borrow?" Qin Guan grinned, "I want to borrow your son's head." As soon as she finished speaking, a ray of light flashed, and then Qianji's head flew into the air. Shenxiu opened her palm, and Qianji's head flew into her palm. She walked slowly towards Yi Xian and bowed slightly. "Young master, please calm your anger." Yi Xian remained silent. Qin Guan suddenly looked around and said, "Young Master Yi is the most distinguished guest of Celestial Treasure Pavilion. He is under the protection of Celestial Treasure Pavilion, and at the same time, he is also my friend." As she spoke, she took out the big sniper and said, "Whoever dares to make him unhappy in front of me, I will send that person to the crematorium." Everyone was speechless. Today, I had a small outburst, and the outburst was filled with courage. I hope everyone doesn't mind if I say a few words of complaint. 2 days ago, I saw a comment. Didn't I describe Qin Guan's appearance and image? In that comment, he said that I was very, very lousy. He said that if I had nothing else to write, I should quickly end it. Don't fill up the word count and waste his traffic. When I saw this comment, I was dumbfounded. Everyone knows that I rarely describe a person's appearance. Basically, it's a black-robed old man, a white-robed old man, a luxuriously robed old man, a long-haired woman, a purple-robed woman. Because of this, I was suggested by a reader. He suggested that when I wrote about a character, should describe their appearance and image in more detail. So, when Qin Guan appeared, I described his appearance and image. However, when I saw that person say that I was purposely filling up the word count, I was dumbfounded. Moreover, the awesome thing is that only he can scold you, and you can't scold him. If he scolds you, you have to endure it. If you scold him, he will say that you have no manners. With this kind of manners, how can you write a book? If other readers speak up for me, he will immediately say that the reader is a bootlicker and AB asterisk starred. Sometimes, I find it a little unbelievable. So it can be like this? Did he learn his shamelessness from Xiao Ta? To be honest, I want to write a new type of cultivator, keystroke Dao. Just say keystroke, I don't want to be shameless, you can do whatever you want. After complaining, it was time to write. Chapter 2206. Yi Xian was dumbfounded. He killed him just like that? In his impression, Qin Guan had a good temper and rarely got angry. Therefore, he did not expect Qin Guan to really kill Qian Ji. Not only Yi Xian, but Qianmu was also petrified on the spot. He killed him just like that? He did not give any face at all. After Shen Xiu killed Qian Ji, his gaze fell on Qianmu with an unfriendly expression. Qianmu turned to look at Qin Guan with an ugly expression. Pavilion Master Qin, is this really necessary? Qin Guan smiled. City Lord Qianmu, I brought my friend to the Great Thousand Domains, but your son investigated him secretly. Not only that, he even purposely got his men to cause trouble for him. As she spoke, she shook her head. City Lord Qianmu, I hate this. Qianmu stared at Qin Guan and suppressed his anger. Does he deserve to die? Qin Guan sighed. City Lord Qianmu, you gave me some convenience when I established the Celestial Treasure Pavilion. If not, I would not have appeared today. Do you think that I am harming you and Qianji City? As she spoke, she shook her head. I am saving you and your Qianji City. Everyone was speechless. Everyone had a weird expression on their faces. Killing someone else's son and saying that it was for their own good? At this moment, Xiao Ta sighed. How terrifying, only he understood what Qin Guan meant. If Qian Ji did not die, the conflict between Yi Xian and Qian Ji would definitely escalate. Qian Ji was also a second generation. He was proud and arrogant. How could he give in to someone? Once the conflict escalated, between Qian Ji City and Yi Xian, only one could live. Yi Xian naturally understood what Qin Guan meant. He walked to Qin Guan and pulled Qin Guan's sleeve with his right hand. He was a little dissatisfied. You make it sound like I am a bad person. Qin Guan blinked. I know the whole story. It was the spirit demon race who came looking for trouble with you first. Thousand Chant City wanted to take sides and give face to the Lord of Five Elements. As for this Qian Ji, as you said, he wanted to test you and then cause you some trouble to test your limits. If your background is ordinary, he will continue to target you and even kill you. Yi Xian was silent. Qin Guan turned to look at Qianmu. City Lord Qianmu, if you are not convinced, you can make your move now. My Celestial Treasure Pavilion will accompany you to the end. Qianmu remained silent for a long time before he said, What are you saying, Pavilion Master Qin? This was all a misunderstanding. Now that the misunderstanding has been resolved, everything is fine. With that, he turned around and left. Qin Guan smiled and said nothing more. Aren't you afraid of his revenge? Yi Xian asked in a deep voice. He's not afraid of me. He's afraid of Shen Xiu. Shen Xiu's strength makes him feel threatened, so he doesn't dare to make a move. Qin Guan smiled. Why isn't he afraid of you? Yi Xian glanced at Shen Xiu and said, Why isn't he afraid of you? I think you're the most dangerous one. Qin Guan blinked. Because I don't cultivate. I don't have any realms. Are you sure you don't know how to fight? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment. I don't. Qin Guan nodded. I don't. However, I know all realms like the back of my hand. Moreover, I know what's beyond realms. Moreover, I'm writing a new realm. I want to create a complete cultivation system. Yi Xian. Actually, many people don't know that I have many powerful treasures. Qin Guan continued. Why? Yi Xian was puzzled. Qin Guan blinked. That's because those who knew about it are all dead. Of course, besides you. Yi Xian was speechless. Meanwhile, the patriarch of the spirit demon race, Mu Su, intended to flee. Yi Xian looked at Mu Su and said, "You want to leave?" Mu Su stared at Yi Xian and said, "What? You want to kill me?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Isn't that obvious?" As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished on the spot. Hiss! A strand of sword light tore through the battlefield. Mu Su's eyes narrowed slightly. You? As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished on the spot as well. Bang! An expanse of sword light suddenly exploded apart, and then both of them retreated explosively at the same time. However, the green profound sword in Yi Xian's hand had vanished the instant he flew backward. Mu Su's pupils constricted, and then he suddenly smashed his right hand forward. A strand of terrifying force swept out from his fist. Bang! An expanse of sword light distorted, and the green profound sword was blasted back to Yi Xian. However, Mu Su's right hand had completely cracked apart, and only his bones remained. A wisp of ferocity flashed through Mu Su's eyes as he glanced at his cracked right hand. He looked at Yi Xian and slowly raised his left hand. In the next moment, the starry sky in the surroundings seethed. Meanwhile, some mysterious experts suddenly appeared from the shadows, and they immediately started to seal off the spacetime in the surroundings. If the surrounding spacetime wasn't sealed off, a battle between experts of this level could directly shatter the major 1,000 territories. The destructive force was too strong. In the distance, Yi Xian stood with his sword in hand, and the green profound sword in his hand trembled slightly. Meanwhile, a wisp of ferocity flashed through Mu Su's eyes. Die! As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly slapped his left hand forward. Bang! At this instant, a terrifying force suddenly surged out from the spacetime above Yi Xian, and the spacetime where Yi Xian resided was instantly shattered. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly wielded his sword. 3 swords as one. Moreover, all 3 of them were quantitative attacks. As soon as he attacked, Qin Guan's eyes instantly lit up. Interesting. Bang! Meanwhile, an expanse of light suddenly erupted in front of Yi Xian. The powerful ray of light tore through everything, and the sealed spacetime in the surroundings was instantly blasted into pieces. A moment later, a figure retreated madly. It was Mu Su. Mu Su retreated hundreds of thousands of feet away, and the moment he stopped, a sword stabbed into the center of his brows without any warning. Hiss! Mu Su's figure stiffened. He'd lost. Yi Xian gazed at Mu Su and was about to allow the green profound sword to absorb Mu Su's soul. However, a terrifying aura suddenly appeared here, and then the green profound sword within Mu Su's body was blasted out by a mysterious force. A moment later, a black vortex entered Mu Su's body. At the same time, a figure silently condensed into form in the sky. Yi Xian gazed at the figure and frowned slightly. The Lord of the 5 Elements. Brother Zhang, who'd remained silent until now, spoke abruptly. The Lord of the 5 Elements. He's on the same level as the Time Master. Yi Xian gazed at the Lord of the 5 Elements and remained silent. The Lord of the 5 Elements stared at Yi Xian as well. How arrogant of you. Yi Xian chuckled. What do you mean by that? It seems like it's your subordinates who intend to kill me, right? The Lord of the 5 Elements glanced coldly at Yi Xian. You'll be able to obtain that heaven vein, but you won't be able to enjoy it. As soon as he finished speaking, he glanced at Qin Guan, and then he turned around and left. Shen Xiu frowned slightly while the saber within his sheath trembled slightly. He was about to attack when Qin Guan stopped him. Qin Guan smiled. Forget it. We have important matters to attend to. As she spoke, she gazed at Yi Xian. I noticed that your cultivation technique is greatly lacking. If you're willing, then I can chat with you and improve your cultivation and strength. Yi Xian hurriedly said, of course not. Qin Guan smiled, come with me. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and left. Meanwhile, Shen Xiu was about to leave silently. Meanwhile, Qin Guan glanced at Shen Xiu, where are you going? Shen Xiu hesitated for a moment and said, to eat. Qin Guan glared at Shen Xiu, you're going to kill the Lord of the Five Elements, right? Yi Xian was speechless. Shen Xiu spoke solemnly. He glanced at the pavilion master before he left, and I noticed a strand of killing intent in his eyes. Qin Guan rolled his eyes at Shen Xiu and said, so, you intend to kill him? Shen Xiu nodded. Qin Guan nodded slightly. Shen Xiu, from this moment onward, I'll tell you one last time. Don't act rashly without my orders, and don't think that you're very good at fighting. Because there are many who are better at fighting than you are. Your temper is too rash, and if you encounter some extraordinary experts, then that temper of yours will kill you. Understand? Shen Xiu nodded slightly, I understand. Qin Guan sighed softly, and then she turned around to gaze at Yi Xian, young Master Yi. Yi Xian smiled, just call me Yi Xian. Don't keep calling me young Master Yi, young Master Yi. How distant is that? Qin Guan grinned, then I'll call you Yi Xian. You can call me Qin Guan as well. Yi Xian suddenly asked, Qin Guan, I remember that you said that's your real name, right? Qin Guan nodded. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, then what's your nickname? Qin Guan smiled, Sifan. Qin Sifan. Yi Xian blinked, then I'll call you Sifan. You don't mind, right? Qin Guan hesitated, and then said, I think, you should call me by my real name. Yi Xian nodded slightly, all right. I'll listen to you. Qin Guan smiled, let's go. After that, she turned around and left with Yi Xian. On the way, Qin Guan suddenly said, just now I saw you perform 3 sword moves. 1 slash to the past, 1 slash to the future, and 1 slash to the present, right? Yi Xian nodded, please enlighten me, Miss Qin Guan. Qin Guan nodded, I have a way to make your 3 sword moves at least 10 times stronger. Yi Xian's expression froze. Is this how you play? 10 times? Qin Guan said seriously, I'm not lying. It's because your understanding of time and space is not deep enough. If you know more, the power of your 3 sword moves will be very powerful. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, please enlighten me, Miss Qin. Qin Guan smiled and said, spacetime is the combination of time and space. It is divided into the past spacetime, the present spacetime, and the future spacetime. The reason why there are the past, the future, and the present is because there is a river of time. Do you know the essence of the river of time? Yi Xian shook his head, I don't know. Qin Guan smiled slightly, the essence is still time and space. Yi Xian, Qin Guan smiled, the so-called river of time itself is formed by time and space. Just like the old hen, where does it come from? It came out of the egg. Where did the egg come from? The egg is laid by the old hen. Do you understand what I mean? Yi Xian. Chapter 2207. Yi Xian was speechless. Understand my A*S. Yi Xian said solemnly, Miss Qin, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Qin Guan smiled, what do you think? Yi Xian shook his head, I don't know. Qin Guan smiled, actually, it's not important. What's important is that you have to understand that the core of the river of time is still spacetime, which is divided into future spacetime, present spacetime, and past spacetime. When you used that sword just now, you didn't use spacetime as the core, but forcibly broke into the past and future spacetime. In this case, you will be rejected by spacetime, even if you have the Time Lord's rule. Yi Xian said solemnly, Miss Qin Guan, you mean that I can integrate with the past and future spacetime, right? Qin Guan heaved a sigh of relief. Oh my god, you finally understand. Yi Xian, Qin Guan continued, if it's an outsider, it's difficult to integrate with the past and future spacetime, because they will reject people who don't belong to their spacetime at this stage. But you don't have this problem, why? Because you have the Time Lord's rule, and your sword, which has the effect of restraining and suppressing spacetime. So, as long as you use it a little, the power of your 3 swords will be greatly improved. Yi Xian nodded slightly, I understand. Qin Guan blinked, do you really understand? Yi Xian said solemnly, Miss Qin Guan, in your mind, is my comprehension very poor? Qin Guan nodded honestly, a little. Yi Xian, Qin Guan hesitated, and then said, you don't mind, do you? Yi Xian said solemnly, in your mind, what kind of people are considered geniuses? Qin Guan thought for a while, and then said, the one who made the sword for you. Yi Xian was completely speechless. It's not that I can't do it, it's that this woman's standards are too high. Qin Guan said, do you want to practice first? Yi Xian nodded. Of course. Qin Guan smiled. Then I'll wait for you. Yi Xian smiled and said, all right. After that, he returned to Xiao Ta's car. Cultivate. Past time and space, future time and space, present time and space. Yi Xian did not forcibly return to the past like before. He began to merge with these space-time, becoming one with them. He had the nomological laws given to him by the Time Ruler and the Qingxian sword, so it wasn't difficult for him. After fusing with spacetime, he realized that the power of his sword was indeed much stronger. It should be said that there was a qualitative change. Qualitative change. Thinking of this, Yi Xian frowned slightly. What was a qualitative change? What he had now was a quantitative change, but after he fused with spacetime, he realized that his 3 swords had surpassed the quantitative change and reached a qualitative change. After a quantitative change, a qualitative change could occur. And these 3 swords of his had already reached a qualitative change. After a long silence, Yi Xian left Xiao Ta and went to the 12th floor of the Celestial Treasure Pavilion, where Qin Guan was busy. Yi Xian glanced at Qin Guan, who was sitting behind the desk, and did not disturb her. Qin Guan suddenly looked up at Yi Xian and said with a smile, it'll be done in a minute. Yi Xian nodded. All right. Qin Guan continued to write. Her writing speed wasn't very fast, and she would stop to think for a while as she wrote before continuing. Yi Xian was a little curious. Miss Qin Guan, what are you writing? Qin Guan smiled and said, it'll be done in a minute. Saying that, she began to speed up. Not long after, she suddenly stood up and walked to Yi Xian with the notebook in her hand. She handed the notebook to Yi Xian and said, for you. Yi Xian took the notebook curiously and flipped to the first page. There were only 2 big words in the middle of the first page, qualitative change. Qualitative change. Seeing these 2 words, Yi Xian was stunned. Qin Guan smiled and said, you've already achieved a quantitative change, and the next step is a qualitative change. As for what a qualitative change is, I've already written a detailed introduction in this notebook. You just need to cultivate according to it. Yi Xian looked at Qin Guan and said, you wrote it especially for me? Qin Guan nodded. Yes. Yi Xian was a little puzzled. Why? Qin Guan blinked and said, don't you happen to need it now? Yi Xian said seriously, I do indeed need it. What I mean is, why did you write it especially for me? Qin Guan was silent. Yi Xian suddenly said, you're not interested in me, are you? Qin Guan quickly waved her hand. No, no. Don't think too much, you. Yi Xian was a little helpless. Then what do you mean? Qin Guan hesitated and then said, "Can I lie?" Yi Xian's expression froze. Qin Guan glanced at Yi Xian and said softly, "Can I?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes." Qin Guan quickly said, "I like to help others. I saw that you were in need, so I wanted to help you. That's it." Yi Xian was speechless. Qin Guan suddenly said, "Let's not dwell on this problem. Let's go, I'll take you to a place." After that, she directly left the study with Yi Xian. In the starry sky, Yi Xian asked, "Miss Qin Guan, where are we going now?" Qin Guan said, "Yedu." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "Yedu?" Qin Guan nodded. "There will be a large-scale auction there today, and people from all the major forces will come. Among them, there is a divine object that will be helpful to you. I'm going to buy it for you." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "For me?" Qin Guan nodded. "A mysterious person put it here for auction and wants to sell it at a good price." Yi Xian looked at Qin Guan. "Why buy it for me?" Qin Guan said seriously, "I like to help others." Yi Xian stopped and looked at Qin Guan without speaking. Qin Guan smiled awkwardly. "You don't seem to believe me." Yi Xian shook his head. "Don't play dumb with me. Tell me the truth." Qin Guan hesitated and then said, "There are two reasons. The first reason is that your father and my father are very good friends, and Uncle Yang has helped us a lot in the Milky Way galaxy. The Shui family is my mother's family. The second reason is that I need your help in the future, and that thing is not that simple. So, I help you now, so that when I ask in the future, you will not refuse." Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "You are so powerful, do you still need my help in the future?" Qin Guan smiled. "That thing, only you can do it. No one else will believe it, including your invincible sister." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "Only I can do it." Speaking of this, he glanced at Qin Guan and then said, "Is it to give birth?" Qin Guan's expression froze. She suddenly walked in front of Yi Xian and then took out a disregard for martial ethics and put it in Yi Xian's hand. "Do you think this disregard for martial ethics looks good?" Yi Xian blinked. "Would you like to have a taste of its power?" Yi Xian hurriedly shook his head and returned the disregard for martial ethics to Qin Guan. Although his strength had undergone a qualitative change, he might not be able to withstand this disregard for martial ethics. It fed nearly 200 million star veins. What kind of concept was this? Qin Guan suddenly said, "Let's go." Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Can you tell me what you need my help with in the future?" Qin Guan shook her head. "No." Yi Xian, Qin Guan suddenly stopped and turned to look at Yi Xian. "If I help you now, you will help me in the future, right?" Yi Xian hesitated and then nodded. "Yes." Qin Guan nodded slightly. "I believe in your character." Yi Xian, after Qin Guan led Yi Xian into a mysterious star region, an old man suddenly appeared in front of Qin Guan and Yi Xian. The old man bowed respectfully. "Pavilion Master, I am Li Xiu, the president of Yi City's Immortal Treasure Pavilion. If you need anything, please let me know." Qin Guan nodded slightly. "How long before the auction starts?" The old man said, 3 days. When he spoke up to hear, he paused for a moment and said, "We'll begin whenever the Pavilion Master says so." Yi Xian was speechless. This Immortal Treasure Pavilion was really good at flattering people. Qin Guan pondered for a moment and said, "Don't waste time. Let's hold it tomorrow." The old man hurried to say, "I will arrange it right away." Then he turned and left. Yi Xian looked at Qin Guan. "What do you want to buy for me?" Qin Guan smiled playfully. "I will keep you in suspense first. You will know when the time comes. Anyway, it suits you very well now." Yi Xian hesitated and then said, "Actually, I think your treasures are quite suitable for me." Qin Guan shook his head. Even if I give them to you, you can't use them because you are very poor. Yi Xian's expression froze. Damn. Very poor. He couldn't refute it. Qin Guan said, my treasures can only be used by myself and Little White. Little White can use them because she has a super spiritual vein. As for others, even if I give them to them, they can't use the power of these treasures because they need money. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then said, why do you earn so much money? Qin Guan smiled. Using science to cultivate theology needs money. Many studies need money. Moreover, I am building a super fleet. This fleet also needs money. Apart from that, I have a very great plan. At this point, she suddenly stopped. Yi Xian was curious. What plan? Qin Guan blinked, it's not convenient to disclose. Yi Xian was speechless. This woman is the best at keeping me in suspense. Not long after, the two of them arrived at Yedu. Yedu was a bustling city, second only to Qianji City. This place could be regarded as a commercial city, because the major forces basically traded goods in this place. Today, Yedu was very lively because Immortal Treasure Pavilion was auctioning 3 supreme divine objects. What was a supreme divine object? Only those with super heaven-defying abilities could be called a supreme divine object. This kind of divine object was rarely seen in 1,000 years. But this time, Yedu had 3 of them at once. The super forces of the entire dark observing cosmos came one after another. Even if they couldn't afford it, they wanted to see these 3 supreme divine objects. Chapter 2208. In Xiao Ta's room. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. In front of him was the notebook Qin Guan had given him. Qualitative change. Under Qin Guan's guidance, his 3 swords had already achieved qualitative change. However, only those 3 swords could achieve qualitative change. Moreover, he didn't know much about what qualitative change was. In this notebook, there was a very detailed record of the qualitative change. What was qualitative change? It was the transformation of something from one state to another. Simply put, it was when a certain substance reached its limit and sublimated again. For example, when his drawing the sword to determine life and death, when superimposed to a certain extent, the sword's power would reach a quantitative change, and when the quantitative change reached its limit, it would leap again, which was a qualitative change. As for the realm of qualitative change, Qin Guan divided it into 2 types. One was a qualitative change in substance, which was called qualitative change, and the other was a qualitative change in mentality, which was called divine change. There was a difference between the 2. Simply put, a qualitative change in substance meant a leap in strength, while a qualitative change in mentality meant that one's mentality would reach another level. Simply put, the former was to increase one's strength, while the latter was to increase one's upper limit. His main goal now was to achieve a qualitative change in substance. In the following time, Yi Xian began to cultivate like crazy. A day later in the outside world. In the main hall of the Immortal Treasure Pavilion. The auction was about to begin, but there were only 10 people in the main hall. Pitifully few. Why? Because the Immortal Treasure Pavilion had a requirement that anyone who wanted to participate in the auction had to first have their assets examined. Only those with at least 1 billion star divine veins were qualified to enter. A billion star divine veins was something that only the top superpowers of the mysterious observing cosmos could afford. Qin Guan arrived in front of Yi Xian's room and gently knocked on the door. A moment later, the door opened, and Yi Xian appeared in front of Qin Guan. Qin Guan looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Qualitative change? Yi Xian nodded. Qin Guan smiled. Let's go to the auction. With that, she turned around and left. Yi Xian followed Qin Guan to the auction house. As soon as they entered the main hall, Li Xiu appeared in front of them. Li Xiu gave a deep bow and said, "Pavilion Master, I have already arranged seats for you and young Master Yi. Follow me." After that, he led Yi Xian and Qin Guan to the center of the hall, which had the best visual effect. Moreover, there was no one else in the first row except for Yi Xian and Qin Guan. Qin Guan glanced at the surroundings and said, "Is everyone here?" Li Xiu said, "What should come has already come." Qin Guan nodded. "Then let's begin." Li Xiu bowed deeply and retreated. Soon, a beautiful woman walked up to the stage. She bowed deeply to Qin Guan, then looked at the crowd and said with a smile, "Thank you, distinguished guests, for coming here. Today, there are 3 supreme divine weapons being auctioned. Please take a look at the first one." As she spoke, she opened her palm and a small black bell appeared in her hand. The bell was only the size of a palm and was completely black. There were mysterious ancient words carved on it. Li Xiu smiled and said, "This item is called the soul-absorbing bell. It comes from the ancient era and is a supreme divine weapon. Shaking this bell can absorb one's soul. Up until now, only experts half a step into the profound observation realm can completely resist the power of this weapon. Anyone below the profound observation realm who is targeted by this bell will have their soul separated in a light case, while their soul will be destroyed in a serious case." As she spoke, she glanced at the crowd and said with a smile, "The starting price is 1.5 billion star divine veins, 2 billion. An old man in a black robe who sat in the right corner suddenly spoke. 2.5 billion. 3 billion. 3.5 billion, in a short while, the price had increased to 4 billion. Hearing this, Yi Xian felt his scalp go numb. Damn it! Were there so many rich people? Could they casually bid billions? Were they cabbages? At this moment, Qin Guan suddenly smiled and said, "Do you find it unbelievable?" Yi Xian nodded. Qin Guan lightly patted Yi Xian's shoulder and said with a smile, "The reason you find it unbelievable is because you are too poor and have not seen the world. You are not experienced enough." Yi Xian's expression froze. He could not refute it. At this moment, the soul-absorbing bell was sold for 6.7 billion. 6.7 billion for a transcendent divine artifact. After the old man bought the supreme divine weapon, he immediately got up and left. Yi Xian glanced at the old man and asked, "Will someone kill me for the treasure?" Qin Guan smiled and said, "No one would dare." Yi Xian was puzzled, "Why not?" Qin Guan said, "Firstly, that person isn't an ordinary person. Secondly, any divine item that is purchased from the Celestial Treasure Pavilion has a protection period of 2 hours. During that period, anyone who dares to touch it will be equivalent to going against the Celestial Treasure Pavilion." Yi Xian nodded slightly, "I understand." On the platform, the beautiful woman suddenly opened her palm, and there was a palm-sized stone in her palm. Yi Xian was stunned when he saw the stone. Because he had seen it before. It was a heavenly vein. The beautiful woman smiled, "There are a total of 3 heavenly veins in the book, and this is the first of the 3. The starting price is 2 billion. As soon as she finished speaking, someone immediately said, 3 billion, 4 billion. 5 billion. 6 billion, Yi Xian glanced at the scene and said, "Is it that expensive?" Qin Guan nodded, "This heavenly vein is in the book, and it has an extremely high research value. This heavenly vein is the first of the 3. If you can fully comprehend it and have a high level of comprehension, you should be able to reach the half-step divine profound realm. If all 3 are combined, you might even reach the divine profound realm." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Is the divine profound realm the highest known realm?" Qin Guan shook his head, "No." Yi Xian was shocked, "Didn't you say that the divine profound realm is the highest realm of the divine universe?" Qin Guan smiled, "That was before. I've already researched the realm above the divine profound realm. Yi Xian's expression froze, and he asked a moment later, what's above the divine profound realm? Qin Guan blinked, I'll tell you once you reach the divine profound realm. Yi Xian was speechless. The price of the heavenly vein had been raised to 8.5 billion. At this moment, Yi Xian felt that the star god vein was like a cabbage that wasn't worth any money. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from the right corner, 10 billion, 10 billion. As soon as this was said, everyone in the hall looked at the person who spoke. The person who spoke was a young man in his 20s. He was extremely young, and he wore a loose green robe. At this moment, an old man on the left suddenly said, 1 billion. The young man immediately said, 11 billion. He directly increased it by 900 million. The old man frowned slightly when he heard this. He looked at the young man and said in a hoarse voice, "You're really generous." The young man smiled, "I have a lot of money." The old man stared fixedly at the young man, 11.5 billion. The young man immediately said, 12 billion, 12 billion. The old man's expression was quite unsightly, 12.5 billion. The young man smiled, 15 billion, 15 billion. As soon as these words were spoken, the surroundings instantly fell silent. It wasn't a small amount. Even these extraordinary powers didn't dare say that they could produce 15 billion right away. The old man's expression was unsightly to the extreme. He glanced coldly at the young man and didn't speak another word. The young man smiled, "What? The origin sect isn't going to continue?" The old man was the vice sect master of the origin sect, Yuan Xiu. Yuan Xiu closed his eyes slowly and fell silent. Meanwhile, the woman on the arena walked over slowly to the young man, and she grinned, "Young master, this is yours now." The young man glanced at her, and then he withdrew a spatial ring and gave it to her. She glanced at it, and there were exactly 15 billion star god veins within it. The woman put the spatial ring away and returned to the arena. Yi Xian said, "Miss Qin Guan, do both of them belong to the Celestial Treasure Pavilion?" Qin Guan shook her head, "No, we're just helping to auction them off. We'll take a 10% commission from the sale." 10%. Yi Xian was astounded, "So you're saying that you're just helping to auction them off and get 1.5 billion star god veins for free?" Qin Guan rolled her eyes at Yi Xian, "Do you think it's as simple as helping to auction them off? We're just helping to advertise them to the entire Guanxian cosmos." Yi Xian said solemnly, "How much does it cost to advertise them?" Qin Guan thought for a moment, and then she said, "It's free." Yi Xian frowned slightly. Qin Guan giggled, "Our Celestial Treasure Pavilion is spread throughout the universe. It's free to help advertise them." Yi Xian, Qin Guan continued, "Actually, do you know why they're selling them on consignment to us? Because of our reputation. Our Celestial Treasure Pavilion has a reputation, and we won't cheat others. If they were to auction them off to others." She shook her head slightly and didn't say anything else. Yi Xian understood. Reputation. This thing was very important. Even he would choose the Celestial Treasure Pavilion. Meanwhile, the woman on the platform suddenly smiled, "Everyone, let's move on to the last divine treasure." As soon as she finished speaking, she opened her palm, and there was a violet sword chest in her hand. The sword chest was 1.5 m long, as wide as an adult's body, and it was completely dark violet. The woman smiled, "The number 1 divine treasure of the ancient era, the Heaven Burial Sword Chest. It's currently ranked 6th on the Alien Divine Treasure ranking. There are 36 divine swords within it, and every single one of them is a supreme divine treasure. Besides that, there's also a super sword formation." As she spoke, she glanced at the crowd. "The starting price is 10 billion. Meanwhile, the young man who was auctioning the Heaven Vein Stone spoke abruptly, 20 billion, 20 billion. Everyone in the surroundings gazed at the young man when they heard this. The young man glanced at Yi Xian and said with a smile, "You're a sword cultivator, and you've come here today for this sword chest, right?" Yi Xian glanced at the young man. "What's wrong?" The young man roared with laughter, "Nothing. I just want to say that you're not fated to have this sword chest today. Because I'm really very, very rich." Yi Xian turned to look at Qin Guan, and Qin Guan raised a finger and said, "Go on." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, 21 billion. Hearing this, Qin Guan was dumbfounded. Yi Xian blinked, "What's wrong?" Qin Guan moved closer to Yi Xian and said softly, 100 billion. Yi Xian was astounded. "Isn't that a little too much?" Qin Guan's beautiful brows knit together slightly. "It's just 100 billion. Is it a lot? I can easily earn a few 100 billion in a day, alright?" Yi Xian's face froze. Qin Guan grinned, "Don't be shocked. I've been uninterested in money since many years ago. Of course, I'm still interested in spending money." Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 2209. I'm not interested in money anymore. Yi Xian fell silent. At this moment, he felt quite suffocated and uncomfortable. 21 billion? The young man roared with laughter, "Aren't you being too stingy?" As he spoke, he gazed at the woman on the platform and said heroically, 30 billion. Qin Guan, who stood by Yi Xian's side, said, "Go ahead. Do whatever you want. Do whatever you want." Yi Xian grinned, 31 billion. 31 billion. Just 100 million more. The young man gazed at Yi Xian, 40 billion. Yi Xian immediately said, 41 billion. The young man's eyes narrowed slightly, 50 billion. Yi Xian said with a smile, 51 billion. The young man stared at Yi Xian. "Do you know how much 50 billion is?" Yi Xian shook his head, "I don't." The young man stared fixedly at Yi Xian with a slightly icy cold gaze. "Why are you still shouting if you don't know?" Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. "Can't I shout if I don't have money?" The corners of everyone's mouths twitched when they heard this. "Damn it! Why are you shouting if you don't have money?" The young man turned to look at the woman on the platform. "Can I shout even if I don't have money?" The woman grinned, "Young master, you can indeed shout if you don't have money. Of course, once the deal is made, then my celestial treasure pavilion will naturally punish him if he doesn't have the money." The young man smiled. "What kind of punishment?" The woman glanced at Qin Guan, who stood by Yi Xian's side, and then she said, "It depends on the person." The others were speechless. The young man's smile instantly turned cold. "What? You won't punish him if he has a powerful background?" The woman grinned, "Young master, you can choose to continue bidding or not. If you don't, then this treasure will belong to this young master." The young man stared fixedly at the woman. "What if he doesn't have money?" The woman's expression was calm. "That's between my celestial treasure pavilion and this young master." The young man fell silent for a short while before he said, 60 billion. At the side, Yi Xian smiled and said, 61 billion. The young man stared at Yi Xian. 70 billion. Yi Xian immediately said, 71 billion. The young man turned to look at the woman on the stage. 100 billion. 100 billion. All of a sudden, the hall became quiet. This wasn't a small number. Even the superpowers of the dark observing cosmos might not be able to fork out such a sum. At the very least, they wouldn't be able to do so in a short time. Since this young man dared to shout 100 billion, he was not simple. The young man turned to look at Yi Xian and provoked, "Keep shouting." Yi Xian suddenly stood up. He stared at the young man with an ashen face. 150 billion. Everyone, seeing that Yi Xian was like an angry bull, the corners of the young man's mouth curled up slightly. 170 billion. Yi Xian suddenly said, "I don't want it." After saying that, he sat back down. Hearing this, the smile on the young man's face suddenly froze. His mind suddenly went blank. In the hall, everyone's expression also became strange. The young man stared at Yi Xian. "You're playing with me." Yi Xian was a little confused. "Brother, why do you say that? I don't have that much money, so I won't shout. Is there a problem?" The young man narrowed his eyes. "No one has ever dared to play with me like this." Yi Xian was very confused. "Didn't you say that you have nothing but money? Since you have money, why are you angry? Could it be?" At this point, Yi Xian pretended to be surprised. "Could it be that you're like me, that you have no money at all and are just shouting nonsense?" Everyone, the young man stared at Yi Xian. "One-on-one." Yi Xian shook his head. "Refuse." The young man said mockingly, "So cowardly?" Yi Xian thought about it and then said, "Is there any benefit in fighting you one-on-one?" Everyone, the young man stared at Yi Xian. "You still want benefits from fighting me one-on-one?" Yi Xian said seriously, "If there's no benefit, who would fight you one-on-one? Do you have nothing better to do? If you want to fight me one-on-one, that's fine. You have a heaven meridian, so use it as a bet." Heaven meridian. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings changed when they heard this. So this young man's target is the heaven meridian. The young man looked at Yi Xian. At this moment, he realized that Yi Xian wasn't stupid, but was acting. Yi Xian was actually coveting his heaven meridian. Yi Xian smiled. "Do you want to fight me?" The young man glanced at Yi Xian. "I have a heaven meridian." "What do you have?" Yi Xian opened his palm, and a stone appeared in his hand. "It's also a heaven meridian." Seeing this, the young man narrowed his eyes. "It's in your hand." Yi Xian nodded. "Do you want to fight me?" The young man was silent. Yi Xian smiled. "It's fine if you don't want to fight. If you don't want to fight, I'll sell this heaven meridian. I'll sell it for at least 200 billion star god meridians." The young man slowly clenched his right hand. He looked at Yi Xian, and no one knew what he was thinking. Everyone knew that there were 3 heaven meridian. His family had already obtained 2, and he was determined to get the 3rd one. Thinking of this, the young man looked at Yi Xian and smiled. "What's there to fight? It'll hurt our friendship. This brother, if I have offended you just now, please be magnanimous and forgive me." Yi Xian was silent. This was a little unexpected. Yi Xian actually didn't want to fight. The young man glanced at Yi Xian and retracted his gaze. He wasn't really stupid. Since this young man dared to use the heaven meridian as a bet, what did it mean? It meant that he was confident. Bear with it. At this moment, the woman on the stage slowly walked to the young man. She looked at him. "Young master, 170 billion star god meridians." Saying that, she handed the sword case to the young man. The young man was silent. The woman's expression was calm. "Young master?" The young man spoke in a low voice, "I don't have that much." The woman nodded slightly, and then she moved aside. Right at this moment, a terrifying pressure suddenly appeared here. In the next moment, a woman with a saber in her hand appeared in front of the young man. It was Shen Xiu. The young man's pupils constricted when he saw Shen Xiu, and he was astounded in his heart. The half-step profound visualization realm. This woman is actually at the half-step profound visualization realm. The Immortal Treasure Pavilion actually possesses such a terrifying expert. Shen Xiu gazed at the young man and said, "There are 3 choices. The first is to pay in full. The second is to pay 30% of the breach of contract. The third is to leave your head behind and hang it outside the hall. The young man's expression was slightly unsightly. He pointed at Yi Xian and said, he shouted for no reason as well, and he violated the rules of the pavilion. Shen Xiu's expression was emotionless. How do you know he doesn't have money? The young man spoke furiously, he said it himself. Everyone heard it. Yi Xian smiled and said, I don't have money, so I don't want it. If you don't have money, then why did you shout? You were the one who called out the final price, not me. The young man stared at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Shen Xiu gazed at the young man and said, make your choice. The young man fell silent for a short moment before he said, I'll pay the penalty. The penalty was a few tens of billions. It was a huge loss. However, he didn't choose to pay in full. Because 170 billion was too huge, and it was huge to the point that even his clan couldn't produce it. He wanted to run away, but Shen Xiu made him give up on this unrealistic idea. The young man opened his palm, and then a spatial ring floated slowly over to the woman on the platform. The woman received the spatial ring, and then she walked slowly over to Yi Xian and Qin Guan before she passed the spatial ring to Qin Guan. The young man's expression instantly became unsightly when he witnessed this scene. All of you. All of you from the Immortal Treasure Pavilion joined forces against me. Meanwhile, an old man on the left ridiculed, joined forces against you? Young man, open your eyes and take a look. This is the pavilion master of the Immortal Treasure Pavilion, Miss Qin Guan. You're really blind. Pavilion Master Qin Guan. The young man was slightly stunned when he heard this, and then he hurriedly cupped his fists and said, Pavilion Master Qin Guan, I'm sorry for the offense just now. Qin Guan smiled, young master, it was you who wanted to entrap my friend first. However, you weren't able to control your actions, so you were enslaved by him instead. You only have yourself to blame. The young man lowered his head slightly and didn't dare speak another word. Qin Guan took the spatial ring from the woman and passed it to Yi Xian. It's yours. Yi Xian blinked, you're giving it to me? Qin Guan nodded. Yi Xian chuckled, how could I accept that? As he spoke, he'd already put the spatial ring away. Qin Guan rolled her eyes at Yi Xian, and then she picked up the sword chest. She sized it up carefully and said, this treasure really is extraordinary, and it just happens to be suitable for you. As she spoke, she passed the sword chest to Yi Xian, it's for you. Yi Xian gazed at Qin Guan, for me? Qin Guan nodded, for you. Yi Xian fell silent for a short while before he asked, why? Qin Guan grinned, if you like it, then give it to me. Yi Xian fell silent for a short while before he said, all right. As he spoke, he put the sword chest away. Qin Guan stood up and said, it's time for us to part ways. Yi Xian gazed at Qin Guan with astonishment because it was quite sudden. Qin Guan smiled, I'm going somewhere to do something. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he smiled, then I'll see you again. Qin Guan grinned, and then she hesitated for a moment before she said, do you want Shen Xiu to stay and help you? Yi Xian shook his head, there's no need. Qin Guan blinked, you're going to rely on yourself? Yi Xian nodded. Qin Guan smiled, then take care of yourself. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and left. Yi Xian suddenly asked, will we meet again? Qin Guan stopped, and she fell silent for a long time before she said, probably not. Yi Xian was quite puzzled, why? Qin Guan turned around to look at Yi Xian and blinked, can I tell you the truth? Yi Xian smiled, of course. Qin Guan remained silent for a long time before she said, young Master Yi, to tell you the truth, I'm already outside Dark Watch Cosmos. The reason why I came back is because I want to see you. The reason why I want to see you is because you are Uncle Yang's son. Uncle Yang is a very outstanding person, because it was really very difficult for him to go from a grassroots to where he is today. I want to see his son and see what kind of person he is. Secondly, you're this generation's man of destiny, and I want to meet this generation's man of destiny. She paused for a moment before she continued, you just asked me if we'll meet again? I said probably not. Because I'm very fast, and you might not be able to catch up to me. Yi Xian was speechless. Qin Guan giggled, you're not angry, right? Yi Xian shook his head with a smile. Qin Guan suddenly walked over to Yi Xian and opened her palm, and a small wooden figure appeared in her hand. She returned the wooden figure to Yi Xian, if you can meet me again and are willing to give it to me, I'll accept it. Yi Xian looked at the wooden figure, it only represents pure friendship. Qin Guan looked at Yi Xian, can I tell the truth? Yi Xian was speechless. Qin Guan smiled and said, I know that besides Uncle Yang, there's also an invincible man of destiny behind you, but I won't choose to make friends with you just because of those two. When I make friends, I don't look at the other person's identity or background, I only look at him. She paused for a moment before she continued, you're resourceful and sentimental, but young Master Yi, forgive me for being blunt, but your path is a little off. Yi Xian looked at Qin Guan, what do you mean? Qin Guan thought for a moment, then said, what I'm going to say next may be a little hurtful, but I don't mean any harm. I just want to help you. As she spoke, she paused for a moment before continuing, the reason you're able to live until now isn't because you're a person of heaven's will, but because of heaven's will and Uncle Yang. You know this, but you've always been avoiding it. Running away from your heart is a sign of weakness. You're not aware of this weakness in your heart. The true path of the Great Tao was to be walked by oneself and not paved by others. They paved the road for you, but you walk away with a clear conscience. This is not good. Also, you may not know this, but the reason you're able to live until now is because of destiny in the Milky Way galaxy. If it weren't for her, your story would have ended a long time ago. She shook her head slightly and sighed, young Master Yi, not only should you walk forward, but you should also look back from time to time. Because only by looking back can you know your original intentions. The you in Qingcheng, you didn't rely on anyone, but you still lived well. At that time, your will was not weaker than your father's. But now, you're just being fancy. The reason why you're being fancy is not because of your own strength, but because of destiny. Because of destiny, you have nothing to fear. She smiled slightly, I came to find you and help you. You must think that I'm trying to curry favor with Uncle Yang or destiny, right? Yi Xian was silent, clenching his fists. Qin Guan said softly, young Master Yi, have you noticed a very serious problem? That is, most of the time, your confidence doesn't come from yourself, but from destiny. Destiny is there, so you have confidence. But don't you think this is a very sad thing? Yi Xian lowered his head slightly, thinking about something. Qin Guan put the little wooden figure in Yi Xian's hand and smiled, I don't hate second generations, but I also don't like those who look up to second generations. Young Master Yi, I look forward to meeting you again. I look forward to you finding your original heart and being yourself. The three swords aren't scary. What's scary is that you treat them as the ceiling, thinking that they can't be surpassed. The more you think that way, the more you can't surpass them. She smiled slightly, the boundary of the universe is where one's heart and feet have yet to reach. The same goes for Tao. Don't use the three swords as the boundary, use yourself as the boundary. Young Master Yi, we will meet again someday. Then, she turned and walked out of the hall. Yi Xian was still silent. After a while, Yi Xian's aura suddenly plummeted. His cultivation level dropped again and again. In a short time, Yi Xian's cultivation level dropped to the first grade of body tempering realm. Inside the hall, the young man was stunned at first, then he laughed crazily, ridiculous, this is ridiculous. Little swordsman is ridiculous. Your Tao heart has been destroyed. So your Tao heart has always been built on someone else, haha. Inside the hall, sighs were heard. This person's state of mind had collapsed. This person is a cripple. At the entrance of the hall, Qin Guan stopped. After a while, she sighed softly and disappeared into the distance. Inside the hall, Yi Xian suddenly smiled. Miss Qin Guan, thank you. Today, I, Yi Xian, will destroy my Tao heart. I am me. I am no longer Yang Ye's son, Qing Er's brother. I am no longer the person of destiny. I am me. As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Xian's aura suddenly skyrocketed. Tao heart was reforged. In an instant, Yi Xian's aura reached its peak. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared on the spot. In the distance, the young man's expression changed drastically. He was about to attack when Yi Xian's sword stabbed half an inch into his forehead. Yi Xian looked straight at the young man. Come on, keep smiling. Smile until I'm satisfied. The young man. P.S. I used to be too obsessed with the monthly votes. Today, I've realized that the monthly votes are not obtained by begging. They are written. Why do I need to ask the readers? Why should I use the readers as the boundary? If I update more and write better, why should I worry about the readers not giving me the votes? Placing hope on others is the weakness of the heart. I will write well and try to write more. You can choose the votes. Chapter 22:10. The hall was deathly silent. Yi Xian's strength had undergone a tremendous change. Actually, no matter if it was cultivating the Tao or the sword, it was all about cultivating the heart. But Yi Xian had broken through in his mental state just now. Strictly speaking, his thoughts had undergone a qualitative change. In other words, the divine shift realm. Moreover, the qualitative change in his thoughts didn't just bring about an increase in strength. The young man in front of Yi Xian had an extremely unsightly expression because he'd actually been unable to react at the instant Yi Xian attacked just now. What did this mean? It meant that Yi Xian's strength far surpassed his own. Yi Xian stared at the young man. Don't you like to smile? Why aren't you smiling anymore? The young man stared straight at Yi Xian. Kill me? As he spoke, a wisp of a smile curled up on the corners of his mouth. You have to think it through. Even though it'll feel good for a moment if you kill me now, have you thought about the consequences? I'm not alone. I have an enormous power behind me. Yi Xian gazed at the young man. I'll let you go now, and our enmity will be settled. All right? The young man was first stunned, and then he said, all right. Yi Xian suddenly exerted force with his right hand. Hiss. The green profound sword pierced directly into the center of the young man's forehead, causing blood to spray. Everyone in the hall was shocked when they witnessed this scene. He's really going to kill me? The young man's eyes opened wide and were filled with disbelief. I said I can. Yi Xian stared at the young man. I don't believe you. As soon as he finished speaking, his green profound sword absorbed the young man's soul, and then the young man's spatial ring flew into his hand. One should never believe the words of one's enemies. If he hadn't reconstructed his Tao heart just now, then the first person to hit him while he was down would be this young man. No, the young man was already hitting him while he was down. The woman on the platform was slightly embarrassed. What should I do? After all, fighting isn't allowed in this hall. But Yi Xian wasn't an ordinary person. She could only act as if she hadn't seen it. Yi Xian took the young man's spatial ring, and then he turned around and left. Inside the hall, the experts were all looking at Yi Xian curiously. Yi Xian walked out of the hall, looked up at the sky, and fell into deep thought. Confidence. Qin Guan reminded him that he had been neglecting a problem. His confidence was built on Qing'er. As long as Qing'er was alive, he would always be alive. The more he thought about it, the more useless he became. Back in Qingcheng, at that time, there was no father, no Qing'er. Didn't he also fight his way out? In life, One needed some opportunities and the help of some benefactors. However, if one placed all their hopes on opportunities and benefactors, wouldn't that be putting the cart before the horse? In Qingcheng, at that time, he was just Yi Xian. But now, he was the son of Green Shirt Swordmaster and Tianming's older brother. Thinking of this, Yi Xian could not help but sigh. These identities were actually a kind of restraint. Now, when people talked about his father, they would give him a thumbs up. One of the three swords, invincible in his generation. Countless years later, when people talked about him, what would they say about him? Green Shirt Swordmaster's son? Brother Tianming? Second generation? Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. One must know one's place. Humans could be shameless, they could be flashy, but they had to have strength. His father was shameless, but no one said anything about him. Why? Because his father had strength. After a long time, Yi Xian opened his eyes and walked into the distance. Invincible in the three swords? No one was born invincible. If his father, Qing'er, and big brother could be invincible, why couldn't he? At that moment, Yi Xian's state of mind underwent an earth-shattering change. In his heart, the three swords were no longer unattainable. Surpass. He had the heart to surpass them. He knew that surpassing the three swords was extremely difficult, but he would do it. He would make it his life's goal and fight for it for the rest of his life. Suddenly, the spacetime in front of Yi Xian trembled, and then a middle-aged man walked out slowly. It was the patriarch of the spirit demon clan, Mu Su. Mu Su gazed at Yi Xian. Pavilion Master Qin has left Darkwatch Cosmos, and no one will protect you anymore. You. Before he could finish, a sword pierced the center of his forehead. Boom! Mu Su's body froze, and his eyes were wide with disbelief. Yi Xian walked slowly to Mu Su and looked up at the horizon. A moment later, he swung his sword, and Mu Su's head shot into the sky, smashed through spacetime, and entered an unknown stellar region. A middle-aged man stood in the middle of that unknown stellar domain. The southern region's Lord of Five Elements. Yi Xian stared at the Lord of Five Elements and smiled. You're the Lord of Five Elements at any rate, yet you keep sending nobodies like him to cause trouble for me. What's the point of that? Come on, let's fight. Once I die, both my heavenly veins will be yours. He was challenging the Lord of Five Elements. In the starry sky, the Lord of Five Elements looked down at Yi Xian without saying a word. Meanwhile, a middle-aged man walked out from behind the Lord of Five Elements and looked down at Yi Xian. Who do you think you are? Are you even worthy of challenging my lord? As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished on the spot. Hiss! A huge crack was suddenly torn in the sky, and a shadow swooped down from the crack, heading straight for Yi Xian. Yi Xian slowly held the hilt of his sword with his right hand, closed his eyes, and placed his right foot on the ground. A moment later, he suddenly opened his eyes and exerted force with his right foot to draw his sword and shoot up into the sky. Hiss! A ray of light tore through the sky. Ah! A shrill and miserable cry suddenly resounded in the sky. In the next moment, a bloody head fell slowly from the sky. It was the middle-aged man's head. The Divine Shift Realm. Someone exclaimed with shock. The Divine Shift Realm. After all, the highest known realm of cultivation was the Visualization Realm, and the Visualization Realm was above the Divine Shift Realm. It could be said that the Divine Shift Realm was the pinnacle of the Visualization Realm. He attained the Divine Shift Realm at such a young age. Countless people in the shadows were extremely shocked. The eyes of the Lord of Five Elements narrowed. At this moment, he was quite shocked as well. Because he hadn't expected that Yi Xian had actually attained the Divine Shift Realm. Yi Xian sheathed his sword, and then he looked up at the Lord of Five Elements. The heavenly veins were given to me by Senior Primordial. What right do you have to seize them from me? As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly drew his sword and slashed. "Oam!" A sword howl shot into the sky, and then a ray of light tore through the sky and slashed down towards the Lord of Five Elements. The Lord of Five Elements remained expressionless as he slowly pressed his right hand down. In an instant, a strand of flames swept out from the surroundings, and it instantly enveloped Yi Xian's ray of light. Bang! Yi Xian's ray of light was instantly incinerated into nothingness by the flames. At the same time, the entire starry sky turned illusory. Moreover, the temperature within Yedu city suddenly rose explosively, and it was so hot that it seemed like the entire city was on the verge of melting. Countless people hurriedly fled the city. The Lord of Five Elements stared at Yi Xian. "You've really surprised me. Because I never imagined that you would actually be able to attain the divine shift realm in such a short period of time. Looks like I shouldn't have been worried about Pavilion Master Qin and should have just killed you." Yi Xian grinned. "It's not too late now." The Lord of Five Elements nodded. "Indeed, it's not too late." With that, he suddenly slammed his right hand down, and in an instant, a pillar of fire fell straight down from the starry sky. Bang! In an instant, the mysterious starry sky where the Lord of Five Elements resided began to melt. Countless people in the city fled in a frenzy. As long as that pillar of fire fell, it didn't matter if Yi Xian could block it or not, Yedu city would be destroyed. Below, Yi Xian stared fixedly at the pillar of fire without a trace of fear in his eyes. When the pillar of fire entered the sky above Yedu city, he suddenly vanished on the spot. Everyone watched as a ray of sword light shot into the sky and slashed at the pillar of fire. Bang! The pillar of fire shook violently, and in the next moment, it exploded. At the same time, a bolt of lightning fell straight down towards Yi Xian's head. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. Instead of retreating, he charged into the sky and slashed at the bolt of lightning. Bang! With a loud explosion, countless arcs of lightning and sword light sputtered everywhere. The entire sky was instantly torn into nothingness, and Yi Xian was also sent crashing into the ground by the powerful force. As soon as he landed, the ground beneath Yi Xian's feet collapsed and turned into a giant abyss. In the starry sky, the Lord of Five Elements looked down at Yi Xian. "That's it?" Below, Yi Xian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and looked up at the Lord of Five Elements. In the next moment, he suddenly disappeared. Chi chi chi. 3 rays of sword light suddenly appeared above the Lord of Five Elements' head. 3 swords as one. Seeing this, the Lord of Five Elements narrowed his eyes, and a trace of seriousness flashed through his eyes. Changing from offense to defense, he pressed his right hand in front of him, and a giant shield of fire appeared in front of him. Bang! Under the 3 slashes, the shield of fire collapsed, and the Lord of Five Elements retreated several thousand feet. Yi Xian looked at the Lord of Five Elements. "That's it? That's it?" The Lord of Five Elements' expression instantly turned ferocious, and he gazed at Yi Xian. "I don't care who's standing behind you. I'll definitely kill you." As soon as he finished speaking, he spread his palms apart, and then countless arcs of lightning instantly condensed between his palms. As soon as they appeared, the starry sky around them started to tremble. In the distance, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. His left hand gripped the Qingxian sword tightly. The Lord of Five Elements suddenly vanished on the spot. Hiss! An enormous pillar of lightning tore through the surroundings and obliterated everything in its path. Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword and slashed. Draw the sword to decide life and death. In an instant, Yi Xian overlapped tens of thousands of attacks. Rumble! The enormous pillar of lightning was instantly slashed apart. Meanwhile, the Lord of Five Elements suddenly flashed over to Yi Xian, and then he smashed his fist against Yi Xian's stomach. At practically the exact same moment, Yi Xian's sword swept through the Lord of Five Elements' throat. Bang! Hiss! Both of them retreated explosively. As soon as Yi Xian stopped, his body had been completely obliterated, and only his soul remained. As soon as the Lord of Five Elements stopped, his body had been completely obliterated as well, and only his soul remained. Both sides had suffered heavy losses. The Lord of Five Elements glanced at his soul, clenched his right hand tightly, and had an extremely unsightly expression on his face. A young man had actually destroyed his body. It was an utter humiliation. The Lord of Five Elements gazed at Yi Xian, and then he slowly closed his eyes. Five elements of the world, heed my command. Condense. In an instant, countless strands of the five elements in the world converged towards the Lord of Five Elements. Bang! The entire river of stars seethed. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment, and then he said, "Experts should stop when it comes to a fight. Farewell." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and vanished. The Lord of Five Elements was stunned. "I've been holding back my ultimate move." "You ran?" The Lord of Five Elements had an extremely unsightly expression on his face. He waved his right hand, and the strands of the five elements that had converged towards him were instantly dispersed. However, space in front of him suddenly split apart, and then a ray of light slashed towards him. Sever the future. It was a single slash of the future. This was also a sword attack that Yi Xian had used all of his strength. The Lord of Five Elements' pupils constricted. This sudden turn of events had caught him completely off guard, and he could only passively defend himself. He raised his hands in front of his chest, and a terrifying aura erupted from his body, forming a defensive barrier. Bang! The barrier shattered, and a sword pierced through the Lord of Five Elements' forehead. The powerful force of the sword sent the Lord of Five Elements' soul flying tens of thousands of feet away. At this moment, Yi Xian appeared in front of the Lord of Five Elements. Xiao Ta suddenly said, "Young lord, didn't you say that you weren't going to be flashy anymore?" Yi Xian asked, "Did I call for help?" Xiao Ta said, "No." Yi Xian asked again, "I didn't rely on my father, and I didn't rely on my sister. I killed him with my own strength. What right do you have to say that I'm flashy? Who said that fighting must be based on martial ethics? Who said that fighting can't be done with one's brain?" Xiao Ta. Chapter 22:11. In front of Yi Xian, the Lord of Five Elements was in a daze. Defeated. He never thought that he would be defeated. Moreover, he was defeated by the person he had once regarded as an ant. The Lord of Five Elements suddenly looked at Yi Xian and roared, "I refuse to accept this." Of course he refused to accept this. He had not even used his ultimate move and was killed by Yi Xian. How could he accept this? The Lord of Five Elements glared at Yi Xian. "If you have the ability, then defeat me fair and square. Don't you think it's shameful to play such dirty tricks? You." Before he could finish, the green profound sword suddenly trembled and began to absorb his soul. At this moment, a terrifying aura suddenly came from the distant sky. The Lord of Five Elements looked up, his eyes burning with hope of survival. He roared, "Law Master, save me." In the depths of the starry sky, an old voice suddenly sounded. "Leave him." At the side, Yi Xian's eyelids twitched and he pressed down with his right hand. Boom! The green profound sword gave up on absorbing and instantly erased the Lord of Five Elements' soul. His soul was completely destroyed. The Lord of Five Elements, at this moment, a terrifying aura appeared in the sky above Yi City. Then, an old man appeared in front of everyone. The Law Master of the southern region. He controlled at least 70% of the laws in the world and his strength was unfathomable. The Law Master looked at Yi Xian with a gloomy expression. Yi Xian smiled sheepishly. "So it's the Law Master." The Law Master stared at Yi Xian. "You know me?" Yi Xian nodded. Who in the world doesn't know the Law Master? To be honest, I've admired you for many years. The Law Master looked at Yi Xian. Just now, you knew that I wanted to save him, so you deliberately killed him before I finished speaking. Are you trying to give me a way out, or are you trying to give yourself a way out? Yi Xian smiled. The Lord of Five Elements tried to kill me and I killed him instead. Is there a problem with that? The Dharma Lord stared at Yi Xian. What I'm saying now is that you knew that I wanted to save him, but you deliberately killed him before I arrived. You. Yi Xian suddenly interrupted the Dharma Master. Who do you think you are? Everyone's faces were filled with astonishment. How could this guy change his attitude faster than flipping a book? Yi Xian looked at the Dharma Master and smiled. Do you really think you're a master just because I call you senior? What does it have to do with you who I want to kill? My father doesn't care about me. Do I need you to care about me? As soon as he finished speaking, he drew his sword and slashed at the Law Master. I've given you a way out, but you don't want to take it. Then die. Just do it. As long as one lives in this world, one shouldn't suffer any grievances. Seeing Yi Xian directly attack, the experts in the dark were all dumbfounded. This young man was a reckless person. Anyone would dare to do it. The Law Master's eyes turned cold when he saw Yi Xian attack. He suddenly waved his right hand and a mysterious law swept down from the sky. Boom! The law had appeared. In the dark, the experts' expressions changed drastically. It should be pointed out that the person in front of them was the Law Master. He controlled at least 70% of the laws in the dark universe, and these laws were not ordinary laws. Every law represented a type of rule, and they possessed the terrifying power to destroy the heavens and earth. In the sky, Yi Xian also sensed the terrifying power of that law. It made his heart palpitate. At this time, he had no way out. He could only bite the bullet and attack. Yi Xian's sword slashed at the law. Chi! Under everyone's gaze, the law was directly torn apart and then shattered. But Yi Xian was completely unharmed. Everyone was dumbfounded. The Law Master's face was also filled with disbelief. His law was directly destroyed? He did not go easy on him, right? Not only everyone, but Yi Xian was also somewhat dumbfounded. What was going on? Had he become so powerful? Soon, he thought of something. The Green Profound Sword. Damn! The Green Profound Sword could break all laws and chaos in the world. He had actually forgotten about this. Yi Xian looked at the Green Profound Sword in his hand in silence. The Green Profound Sword could break all laws. In other words, although his cultivation level was not as high as the Law Master's, his sword had the effect of restraining the Law Master. Xiaofan suddenly said, "Young Master, don't tell me you don't want to use the Green Profound Sword?" After a moment of silence, Yi Xian said, "No need." As he spoke, he opened his palm. The Green Profound Sword transformed into a ray of sword light and returned to Xiaofan's body. Yi Xian looked at the Law Master in the sky. He opened his palm and an ordinary sword appeared in it. The Law Master stared at Yi Xian with a gloomy expression. "Are you looking down on the old man?" With his eyesight, he could naturally see that the Green Profound Sword was extraordinary. However, he did not expect that Yi Xian would actually keep the sword. Was he looking down on the Law Master? Below, Yi Xian pointed the sword at the Law Master. "Let's fight again." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly disappeared. Buzz! The sound of a sword suddenly soared into the sky and shook the heavens and earth. In the sky, a trace of hostility flashed in the Law Master's eyes. He took a step forward and pressed his right hand down. Boom! With this pressure, the starry sky turned upside down and pressed down. Starry Sky Law. It could control thousands of starry skies. As the starry sky pressed down, in an instant, the expressions of all the experts in Yedu changed dramatically. This was not just aimed at Yi Xian, but the entire Yedu. If it fell, the entire Yedu city would be annihilated. Below, a trace of hostility flashed in Yi Xian's eyes. He slowly closed his eyes and his body gradually became illusory. Time and space distorted. At the same time, he suddenly drew his sword and slashed. Life and death were decided by drawing the sword. Buzz! The sword's cry suddenly resounded throughout the universe. Boom! As soon as Yi Xian swung his sword, the starry sky that was hanging upside down became illusory. However, Yi Xian was also sent flying hundreds of thousands of feet away. As soon as he stopped, he fell into an unknown and mysterious spacetime abyss. In the spacetime abyss, streams of terrifying and mysterious energy kept corroding him. Yi Xian ignored the corrosive force. He looked up at the Law Master in the distance. The Law Master's mouth twitched. That's it? How dare you look down on me? You! Before he finished speaking, a sword light suddenly slashed down from above his head. Slash the future. Boom! The Law Master was directly slashed tens of thousands of feet away by this sudden sword. Yi Xian, who had merged with spacetime, could slash the future and the past silently. Even experts at the level of the Law Master could not feel the changes in spacetime. As soon as the Law Master stopped, another sword slashed down. Slash the future again. The Law Master narrowed his eyes. He suddenly opened his palm and a rule floated up from his palm. Boom! Yi Xian's sword was directly blocked by this rule. However, another sword arrived. One sword followed the other. Each sword was faster than the one before. Each sword was stranger than the one before. In the battlefield, the Law Master kept retreating. In the face of Yi Xian's strange swords, he could only passively defend because he did not know when these swords would fly out. He could only react when they flew out. At this time, he had already lost the opportunity to take the initiative to attack. In the battlefield, Yi Xian's flying swords increased in number. All of them slashed the future. This was not the most terrifying thing. The most terrifying thing was that there were still swords that slashed the past. With his current attainments in spacetime, whether it was the future or the past, he could make the swords appear at any time. In fact, he had never tried this before. When he was fighting with the Law Master just now, this idea suddenly appeared in his mind. 3 swords in one? No, he wanted to play around. He wanted to use one sword at a time. However, he would not only use 3 swords. He wanted to use countless swords. As for the consumption, he now had tens of billions of star divine veins. He could afford it. If he did not have these star divine veins, he would not have dared to play like this. In fact, if he replaced these swords with the profound azure sword, their power would be even more terrifying. However, he still did not use the profound azure sword. In the battlefield, the Law Master was still being suppressed. This time, he had retreated hundreds of thousands of feet. As for Yi Xian, he did not dare to stop. Once he stopped, the Law Master would definitely counterattack. He was also rather wary of the Law Master's mysterious laws. The more Yi Xian fought, the more excited he became. Although he did not have the profound azure sword, his aura grew stronger and stronger. Now, he was completely suppressing the Law Master. The powerhouses hidden in the shadows were all shocked. Yi Xian was only at the divine change realm, but he could suppress the Law Master, one of the superpowers of the Southern Territory. This was too unbelievable. It must be known that the Law Master was at least half a step into the observer realm. Do not underestimate this half step. This half step was a gap that countless people would never be able to cross in their entire lives. At this moment, Yi Xian, who was in the sky, suddenly disappeared. He was multitasking. Not only was he crazily executing the past and the future, but he was also executing the present. The moment Yi Xian disappeared, the Law Master's pupils suddenly shrank. He could only watch as Yi Xian's sword slashed towards him. At this moment, he was not only facing Yi Xian's sword, but also countless swords from the past and the future. If an ordinary person faced such a terrifying sword, they would have been decapitated long ago. The Law Master suddenly roared angrily, 10,000 techniques. As soon as he said this, the power of countless laws suddenly surged out of his body. These laws formed a protective barrier around his body. However, these laws could only barely block Yi Xian's swords. This was because Yi Xian's swords had reached a qualitative change. Not only that, but his consciousness and thoughts had also reached the divine change realm. If the Law Master was truly at the observer realm, he could easily break through. Unfortunately, he wasn't. He was only half a step into the observer realm. Seeing that his 10,000 techniques still couldn't block Yi Xian's swords, the Law Master suddenly raised his head and roared, "Time Master, this person has disrupted spacetime and can travel to the past and the future at will. Are you really not going to stop him?" He knew that the reason Yi Xian was using these strange swords was because Yi Xian had disrupted time. The Tao of time was not under his control, so he couldn't do anything to Yi Xian. However, he knew that the Time Master could restrain Yi Xian. The Time Master. The Law Master's voice passed through layers of spacetime and finally reached the southern side of the Dark Observer universe. A moment later, a voice suddenly rang out from within the divine court of time. "Who dares to disrupt time? Are you tired of living?" As soon as the voice finished, a figure shot into the sky, straight into the clouds. His speed increased, and in the blink of an eye, he arrived in the sky above Yi City. This person was the Time Master. The Time Master's expression was extremely gloomy. "Who dares to disrupt spacetime? Are you tired of living? Huh?" The Law Master pointed angrily at Yi Xian in the distance. "That's the one." Before he could finish speaking, more swords slashed at him, interrupting him. The Time Master turned to look at Yi Xian. When he saw Yi Xian, his expression froze. Suddenly, he felt his legs turn to jelly. In the distance, the Law Master, who had been forced into a desperate situation by the swords, suddenly roared, "Why aren't you killing him?" The Time Master. P.S. Work hard to save up. I'll surprise everyone next time. Chapter 22:12. It had to be said that the Time Master was stunned. Wasn't that young Master Yi? Before he came, he had some doubts. Who was disrupting spacetime? After all, he would be the first to know if someone was disrupting spacetime. But when he saw Yi Xian, he understood. Because Yi Xian had the nomological rules he had gifted him, Yi Xian's disrupting spacetime was equivalent to his permission. Therefore, the spacetime Tao did not give him any feedback. Of course, this was not the main point. The main point was that this was young Master Yi. Kill young Master Yi? Was this Law Master crazy? Seeing that the Time Master was stunned, the Law Master who was struggling in the distance shouted angrily, "Time Master, what are you waiting for?" The Time Master looked at the Law Master coldly. "What are you shouting for? Do I know you that well?" "Law Master, I don't know you that well." Hearing this, the Law Master's eyes widened. He did not understand the situation. "You," the Time Master said angrily, "what about you? Don't talk to me. The old man does not know you." The Law Master was speechless. At this moment, the spacetime in the distance suddenly split open. The next moment, a huge Tao character flashed out from the split space. Boom! In an instant, the surrounding starry sky boiled and tumbled. Tao nomological rules. In the distance, Yi Xian's pupils suddenly shrank. He turned around, put his palms together, and slashed forward. Chi! A ray of sword chi slashed out from his palm. Boom! The sword light shattered and Yi Xian retreated. In the distance, the sword light around the Law Master disappeared. The Law Master was able to escape. After Yi Xian stopped, his face instantly darkened. Damn, he did not care about martial ethics. Here comes another one. In the distance, the spacetime split open and an old man slowly walked out. The old man wore a black long-sleeved robe. His hair and beard were all white and his eyes were as sharp as knives. The Law Master. The other super big shot of the southern region and the strongest of the four masters. He controlled 70% of the world's Tao nomological rules. The Law Master looked at Yi Xian coldly. At that moment, the Time Master hurriedly walked up to Yi Xian. Yi. Young Master Yi, are you alright? Yi Xian glanced at the Time Master and said, you won't join forces with them to fight me, right? The Time Master shook his head. I'm not familiar with them. I'm really not familiar with them. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, Senior, don't do that. I don't rely on my younger sister anymore. The Time Master glanced at Yi Xian. F***ck, I don't believe you. In the distance, the Law Master suddenly shouted angrily, Time Master, what is the meaning of this? The Time Master looked coldly at the Law Master. What does my intentions have to do with you? The Dharma Master glared at the Master of Time. He has disrupted time and space. Are you blind? The Time Master said angrily, you think he can just because you say so? The Dharma Master was stunned. Then, he said, everyone saw how he disrupted the past and future just now. The Time Master was expressionless. I didn't see anything. The Law Master was speechless. The Time Master said, so what if he disrupted time and space? Who made the rule that time and space cannot be reversed? The Law Master stared at the Time Master. You made the rule. The Time Master said angrily, from now on, this rule is invalid for young Master Yi. Young Master Yi can do whatever he wants as long as he's happy. The crowd was speechless. Yi Xian was speechless. The Law Master looked at the Time Master with an ugly expression. Is there something wrong with your brain? The Time Master ignored the Law Master and looked at Yi Xian with a smile. Young Master Yi, will you come with me to the Time Court? Yi Xian glanced at the Path Master and the Law Master in the distance. In the distance, the Tao Lord and Dharma Master said, I'll give you trouble, right? The Time Master shook his head. No trouble, no trouble. The Path Master suddenly said, Gong Fu, I'm a little confused. The Time Master turned to the Path Master. Path Master, this matter doesn't seem to have anything to do with you. Why do you have to interfere? The Path Master smiled. You know, Law and Tao are one family. The Time Master was silent. The Path Master smiled. Gong Fu, although we're not friends, we're friends. Can you not interfere in this matter? The Time Master shook his head. No. The Path Master narrowed his eyes. Can you give me an explanation? The Time Master said calmly, you won't believe me even if I tell you. Why bother explaining? I'll always be with young Master Yi. The crowd was speechless. Yi Xian hesitated and said, Senior, I don't rely on my sister anymore. The Time Master nodded. I understand. I understand. Yi Xian was speechless. In the distance, the Law Master was furious. He was about to attack but was stopped by the Path Master. He could see that something was wrong. The Path Master looked at Yi Xian and said, let's go. With that, he turned and left. The Dharma Lord hesitated for a moment, then hurriedly followed. After the Law Master and the Path Master left, the Time Master turned to look at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, come with me to the Time Court. Yi Xian smiled. Senior, I won't go to the time court. I don't want to cause you trouble. The Time Master was displeased. Young Master Yi, what are you saying? It's too distant between us to talk about these things. Yi Xian was speechless. The Time Master said, don't worry, young Master Yi. Whether it's the Law Master or the Path Master, the Time Court will face them together with you. The Time Court is willing to live and die with young Master Yi. Yi Xian was speechless. If it was in the past, he would be overjoyed. But now, he was thinking too much. He and his sword alone. She is indeed helping Thousand Chance City. As he spoke, he turned and walked into the hall. At this moment, he suddenly became much older. The old man sighed softly. On a certain mountain peak, the Path Master and the Law Master stood side by side. The Law Master's expression was extremely ugly. The battle with Yi Xian was already a humiliation to him. The Path Master suddenly said, you are going to kill him not for the Lord of Five Elements, but to obtain the 2 veins of the sky from that young man, am I right? The Law Master was honest. Yes. As he spoke, he looked at the Path Master. Perhaps not just 2, but 3. Moreover, as far as I know, he has the Heaven Burial Sword Box and a terrifying divine sword. In addition, he has tens of billions of star divine veins. The Path Master was silent. He did not care about the Heaven Burial Sword Box. He was a little interested in the divine sword, but he was most interested in the veins of the sky. As long as he obtained 3, he might be able to reach the legendary observer state. This was what he cared about the most. After a while, the Path Master said softly, that young man is not simple. The Law Master was expressionless. So what? There are 3 veins of the sky. He has 2 now, or even 3. If we kill him, we can obtain 3 veins of the sky. When the 3 veins of the sky are gathered, it will be time for us to change our destiny. The Path Master was silent. The Law Master continued, the reason why the Time Master is helping that young man is probably because of the veins of the sky. If he obtains 3 veins of the sky, then the Master of the Southern region will not be you, but the Time Master. Hearing this, the Path Master frowned slightly. Cultivation was about being invincible and living forever, but it was also about one's desires. Being invincible and living forever were all desires. Cultivation was not about clearing one's heart of desires. It was about satisfying one's inner desires. After a while, the Path Master said, let's discuss this further. Hearing this, the Path Master's lips curled up slightly. He knew that no one could resist the temptation of 3 veins of the sky. On a certain mountain peak, Yi Xian sat on the ground with his legs crossed. The Qingxian sword floated quietly beside him. Xiaofan suddenly said, young master, why did you reject the Time Master? I think you can join forces with him and fight. Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm and Xiaofan appeared in it. Yi Xian looked at small tower and sighed in a low voice. Half of the credit goes to you for my flashy ways. Then, he shook his head. Xiaofan misled me. Today, I will destroy the tower to stabilize my Tao heart. Xiaofan, have a safe journey. Then, he pointed the Qingxian sword at Xiaofan. Xiaofan. Chapter 22:13. F***ck. Xiaofan was so frightened that he jumped out. Young master, you have to calm down. Calm down. Yi Xian laughed out loud. With a thought, the Qingxian sword returned to the small pagoda. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground again and slowly closed his eyes. Seeing that Yi Xian had no intention of destroying the tower to stabilize his Daoist heart, Xiaofan breathed a sigh of relief. It had to admit that its young master was indeed different. On top of the mountain, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground, allowing the gentle breeze to caress his body. Calm. Focus. Now, he had one more thing. Enlightening the heart. What was enlightening the heart? It was to look straight into one's heart. He had done this before, but he had not done it thoroughly. Just as Qin Guan had said, along the way, Qing had paved the way for him, so he walked with a clear conscience. Was the great path paved by others? Of course not. Running away from one's heart was a sign of weakness. Inner weakness. Not only did one have to walk forward, but one also had to look back. Only by looking back could one always remember one's original intention. Qing had once said, if one's original intention did not change, one would be invincible. Original intention. Yi Xian opened his eyes and looked toward the horizon. What was his original intention? Was it to be a flashy second-generation heir? Whenever something happened, it would be either his father or Qing, Yi Xian laughed at himself. Suddenly, he hated his past self. Yi Xian stood up and said softly, from today on, I will not use Xiao Ta to cultivate, and I will not use the azure sword anymore. As soon as he finished speaking, the Qingxian sword entered the small tower with a thought. Boom! A sword will suddenly surged out of Yi Xian's body. Like a tidal wave, it instantly filled the sky. His Taoist heart was solidified. Soul suddenly said in a trembling voice, Young lord, don't you want me anymore? Yi Xian smiled. No, I just want to work hard. I want you to be proud of me one day, and not the other way around. After a long silence, Soul said, I'll wait for you. Yi Xian laughed. He opened his palm and the Heaven Burial Sword case appeared in his hand. Looking at the Heaven Burial Sword case in his hand, he fell silent. Qin Guan had given it to him. Inside, there were 12 super divine swords. Although they were not as good as the Qingxian sword, there were many of them. Moreover, there was also a sword formation. If he used it, he was confident that he could kill that Dharma master in a short time with the green Xian sword. After a long time, Yi Xian put away the Heaven Burial Sword case. Xiao Ta suddenly said, Young lord, don't you need it? Yi Xian smiled, I'll return it to Miss Qin Guan when I see her in the future. Xiao Ta was puzzled. Why? Yi Xian smiled. I shouldn't have taken something from her for free. I was too thick-skinned back then. Xiao Ta, after putting away the sword case, Yi Xian entered Xiao Ta and arrived in front of Enlancio. Enlancio had already entered a meditative state. He had given both veins of the heavens to Enlancio to study. Yi Xian glanced at the 2 veins of the heavens in front of him. In the end, he did not choose to study them. Right now, he only wanted to stabilize his sword heart and Tao heart. At this moment, Yi Xian frowned slightly. In the next moment, he left the small pagoda. As soon as he left the small pagoda, the space and time in the distant sky split open, and a mysterious black-robed man slowly walked out. Boom! In an instant, the entire world became illusory. Half-step observer state. Yi Xian looked the mysterious black-robed man in the eyes. You're not a Dharma lord or a Tao lord. You're the clansman of that youth with the heavens. A trace of surprise flashed through the black-robed man's eyes. He sized up Yi Xian and said, Divine transformation. Yi Xian nodded slightly and raised his thumb. The sword in his hand suddenly shot into the sky and slashed at the black-robed man. The black-robed man's eyes narrowed slightly as he took a step forward and pointed a finger forward. Crack! As soon as the finger descended, the space in an area of a few million kilometers instantly split open. Countless mountains were reduced to powder and the ground cracked. Boom! The sword in Yi Xian's hand broke into pieces. The black-robed man looked at Yi Xian. Aren't we going to have a chat before we fight? Yi Xian nodded slightly. I'm sorry, I've been a little arrogant lately. I want to fight just because of a disagreement. You? Since you want to chat, then let's chat. The black-robed man said, the heavens belong to my clan. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly. The Dao clan. The black-robed man frowned slightly. Young man, being too smart isn't a good thing most of the time. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, according to what I know, you've already destroyed the forbidden grounds of the ruins of God in the Eastern Territory. However, you didn't attack. Moreover, you've even sealed off the news. Let me guess, you're either facing some sort of difficulty or plotting something, right? The black-robed man gazed at Yi Xian without saying a word. Yi Xian smiled. I'm not interested in the enmity between your Dao clan and the Dark Observer Cosmos. The black-robed man said, you killed our people and even seized a heavenly vein. Yi Xian replied with a question. He wanted to kill me, so I killed him instead. What's wrong with that? The black-robed man fell silent for a moment before he said, according to what I know, you have another heavenly vein. Yi Xian nodded. The black-robed man slowly clenched his right fist. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly. Do you want to fight? The black-robed man nodded. I have no choice. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly stomped his right foot against the ground. Rumble. In an instant, everything in the surroundings was destroyed. A strand of terrifying force swept down from the sky and tore everything into pieces. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. At the same time, his body started to become ethereal. Hiss. Suddenly, a sword passed through the terrifying force and slashed down towards the black-robed man. Future slash. He'd already attacked while they were chatting just now. Chat with you? Sure, but I have to attack first. The sudden attack caught the black-robed old man off guard. However, his reaction was extremely swift, and he immediately smashed his fist forward. He was going head-on against it. Bang! The sword light shattered, and the black-robed man retreated repeatedly. However, he hadn't stopped, and he slashed down once more. No, it wasn't just a single strike, it was numerous strikes. Moreover, it wasn't just future slash, it was past slash as well. Each strike was more mysterious than the last. The black-robed man's expression instantly changed when he witnessed this scene. On the other hand, the terrifying force that the black-robed man emanated had been slashed into pieces by Yi Xian. Numerous rays of light appeared incessantly around the black-robed man, and every single one of them was extremely mysterious and impossible to guard against. Under such circumstances, the black-robed man was pushed back incessantly by the attacks of these swords. He could only defend passively. Because Yi Xian's attacks were continuous, and they appeared without the slightest sign. Especially when future slashes intersected with past slashes. It was truly too exhausting. Because he could only react after the swords appeared, and such a situation required a high degree of concentration. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. The black-robed man's pupils constricted, and he suddenly pressed his palms together. Soul emerge. Bang! As soon as he finished speaking, he abandoned his body, and his soul floated over 10 kilometers away. At the same time, his body exploded into pieces. Bang! An expanse of light was blasted back. Yi Xian returned to where he stood earlier, and then he raised his head to look at the black-robed man. He was quite surprised that the black-robed man had abandoned his body. Meanwhile, the black-robed man slowly clenched his right fist, and then the space around him instantly became illusory. The river of space and time had appeared. After the long river of time had shown up, Yi Xian's slash of the past and slash of the future were still weird, but they were traceable. After all, Yi Xian was still within space. The black-robed man slowly clenched his right fist, and it didn't take long for his body to be reconstructed at a visible speed. In the distance, Yi Xian frowned slightly. How could they do that? It didn't take long for the black-robed man's body to be restored. Of course, it was different from his original body. After all, it had just been reconstructed. The black-robed man gazed at Yi Xian. That sword of yours. He hadn't finished speaking when Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of him, and then an expanse of light swept down like a waterfall. Hiss! The surrounding space started to be obliterated as soon as he swung his sword. The black-robed man narrowed his eyes, and then he clenched his right fist. In an instant, boundless energy condensed in his palm, and then he punched upwards. Head on. Bang! An expanse of light suddenly erupted, and then the black-robed man fell straight down from the sky. However, Yi Xian didn't stop there. He continued charging down and swung his sword. Hiss! An expanse of light tore down from the sky. A wisp of viciousness flashed through the black-robed man's eyes. He clenched his fists, and then he transformed into a white light that shot up into the sky. Clang! Rumble! A deafening explosion suddenly resounded in the sky, and then the black-robed man fell straight down from the sky. The speed at which he fell was even faster than before, and he fell into an unknown and mysterious space-time abyss in the blink of an eye. As soon as the black-robed man stopped, dozens of sword lights suddenly slashed down like thunderclaps. The black-robed man's pupils constricted, and he was shocked. He hadn't expected Yi Xian's sword to be so terrifying. The black-robed man's face instantly turned pale in the face of these dozens of sword lights. At this moment, he knew that he couldn't hold on anymore. He would definitely die. At this critical moment, the space in front of him suddenly split open, and then a fist suddenly flew out and headed straight for Yi Xian. In the distance, Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he swung his sword with both hands. Life and death were decided by drawing the sword. Tens of thousands of sword lights instantly overlapped. Because he felt danger. Bang! The tens of thousands of sword lights instantly shattered upon coming into contact with the fist, but the fist didn't shatter, and it charged straight for Yi Xian again. In the distance, Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he issued a command in his heart. Countless flying swords slashed out. Hiss! 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 Numerous flying swords slashed the fist, and when it arrived before Yi Xian, it was already slashed by the tens of thousands of flying swords. The fist was shattered, but Yi Xian retreated explosively for almost 30 kilometers. After Yi Xian stopped, he looked into the distance. In the depths of the cracked space, he saw a young man in a black robe. The young man had his right hand behind his back, and his left hand was holding a black stone. Yi Xian did not know what it was. Suddenly, a few dozen swords appeared around the young man. Slash the future. Slash it over. Moreover, it was a slash that traversed space. In the depths of the starry sky, the young man's expression was calm. He suddenly opened his right hand and clenched it tightly. Bang! In an instant, the area of space he was in was obliterated, and Yi Xian's sword was obliterated along with it. It destroyed the river of time. It was the river of time that destroyed the area he was in. The visualization state. Yi Xian's expression became slightly solemn. Meanwhile, the young man suddenly took a step forward and smashed his fist forward. Crack! As soon as the punch was thrown, the space-time galaxy where Yi Xian was suddenly shattered and annihilated. Even the matter was wiped out. At the same time, Yi Xian did not even have a chance to dodge, because he found that the punch had already landed on his body the moment the young man threw the punch. Bang! Yi Xian's body shattered, and his soul retreated 300 kilometers. After he stopped, Yi Xian's eyes narrowed, and he looked up at the young man in the distance with slight excitement. It ignores all matter and attacks the body. So it can be like this. As soon as he finished speaking, he slowly closed his eyes, and in the next moment, the sword in his hand suddenly flew out. In the depths of the starry sky, the young man flicked his sleeve. Bang! An expanse of sword light on his sleeve was obliterated. Even though he didn't injure the young man, Yi Xian was extremely excited because he understood how to use space and matter again. A breakthrough. Yi Xian was about to break through again. The black-robed man returned to the young man's side, and the black-robed man glanced at Yi Xian. "Young master, do you kill this person?" The young man glanced at Yi Xian. "We can't. His destiny hasn't ended yet." After saying that, he turned around and left. The black-robed man hesitated for a moment, and then said, "Young master, this person is extraordinary. If we let him live, in the future, our Dao clan," in the distance, the young man didn't even look back. "Fear the strong. That's the behavior of the weak. The stronger he is, the happier I will be." The black-robed man thought about it, and then shook his head with a smile. "That's right, why should I worry? After all, my young master is a one-of-a-kind heaven-defying cultivator." A heaven-defying cultivator. P.S. I'm not asking for votes. I'm going to have no desires. I'm going to put down the monthly votes, and I'll be at ease. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.